The world is changing. Inspiration is everywhere. It has never been so easy to connect, share, and bring people together. We're learning from others and finding the best in ourselves. Challenging our beliefs. Sharing our vulnerability. Overcoming our fears. Transforming ourselves so we can transform the world. How far can we go?
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is... This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Aubrey Marcus, the best-selling author, biohacker, broadcaster, and entrepreneur. Your company, On It, specializes in total human optimization using a holistic philosophy that encompasses physical, mental, and spiritual well-being. You are a passionate advocate of the use of psychedelic medicine to heal trauma, reset the mind, and overcome addiction. You host the Aubrey Marcus podcast with over 10 million downloads and have been featured in Entrepreneur and Forbes magazine. You've also appeared an incredible 17 times on the Joe Rogan Experience dating back to 2010. Your first book, Own the Day, Own Your Life, is a New York Times bestseller, and your upcoming book, Master Your Mind, Master Your Life, provides a roadmap to free ourselves from resistance, face our inner critic, and overcome trauma. Aubrey, welcome to London Real.
It's a real pleasure, man. Happy to be here.
And man, it's great to have you. You know, we've been trading emails for 9 years. I still remember when we started, we were bouncing emails back and forth with you. You know, for people that don't know, we were an On It affiliate with Alpha Brain back in 2011. We were plugged in, and we were always wanting to get you on the show, and I'm just so glad we finally made it happen.
We're just on time, right on time, Brian. Made it happen.
Perfect. And I also want to say something else. You know, you did an episode with Joe Rogan in 2010, August 2010. It was episode 46. And I watched that episode, Aubrey. I was still working in the city of London in finance. I was a credit derivatives broker. And you planted a seed in my mind that day, Aubrey. It was the first time I heard the word ayahuasca. And it planted that seed in my mind. And when we started the show, like a year later, when we started London Real after I left that, it was about 5 or 6 months later that I had my first ayahuasca experience, and it became almost kind of part of the show. And I remember thinking, there's no way I can go back because the Bank of England's never going to allow me if I talked about drugs. We thought we were going to get arrested. You know, we didn't know because these days, everyone and their mother, they go live and do psychedelics. But back then, there weren't many people talking about it. So I just wanted to thank you for doing that because it changed my life. It changed the show. And recently I went back in about 2 years ago, went down to Soltara in Costa Rica. I know you know those guys, and we made a whole movie about it called Reconnect, and it was really powerful. So it's all because of you. So thank you, Aubrey. I appreciate that.
Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, this was a big passion of mine. It started when I actually graduated high school. So this was 21 years ago, and I got to go on a vision quest with a traditional shaman who took me on a psilocybin journey out in the mountains of New Mexico. And I was absolutely terrified because at that point, I mean, there's virtually nobody talking about it. There's a couple like kind of shady resources and a few people who've talked about it from like the 60s, you know, but there wasn't anything that I could really sink my teeth into and understand it better. So I remember grabbing a rock from the land, and I was like, as long as I hold this, I'll remember that I exist. You know, I was just terrified. And then I took the mushrooms, and at that point, you know, I was a staunch atheist, like had no spiritual foundation, and I'm holding this, and I just feel my body evaporate and just exercise pure awareness in that feeling of just being completely the essence of myself. And I was like, oh, I got to rethink some stuff. Like I got to change my perspective. My paradigm was completely altered from that point. And that got me on the journey. And of course, from the psilocybin, then went to ayahuasca and iboga and wachuma and all the great plant teachers of the world. But I feel just super fortunate that I was, you know, crossed paths with that shaman and was able to have that experience because it absolutely changed the course of my life. And then of course, allowed me to change the course of other lives like yourself.
Yeah, because it makes sense, because I didn't know about this Vision Quest till I started doing extra research for this today. And, you know, it makes sense now because you were speaking with like kind of knowledge and authority when you were, you know, talking to Joe 10 years ago. So you had obviously had experience with psychedelics, and that, as opposed to the guy that just did ayahuasca like a year before. And that could come out in the way you spoke about it. But I was wondering, like, you know, like you said, there's no YouTube back then. There's no articles. You can't Google search it. And so you had no reference, which is hard, because even when I did it, there were people saying that it was, you know, helpful for you. But back when you did it, I mean, most people thought magic mushrooms were for hippies and weirdos, and it probably caused brain damage. And, you know, there weren't great narratives out there.
The narrative was you will find the window from the highest place you can find and think you're going to fly and jump off and fly. Like, that was the story that everybody was telling. And of course that story is absolutely not true. It's about the last thing, you know, you want to do on mushrooms. But you know, it took a little bit of courage then, but I also felt really guided, you know, whatever that thing is, whatever that capital P potential that we have, that's just always whispering in our ear and asking us, inviting us to more in our life. That was certainly present then. And it was just, fortunately, I listened, you know, because there's been plenty of times where I've ignored that little whisper in my ear, and that doesn't always work out so well, but that time I did.
How did you know not to fight it? Because it's, I mean, the usual instinct, the first time I tried psilocybin, I was actually in Amsterdam, and I just fought it the whole time, and it was really stressful, and I told myself never again. And that was kind of 7-8 years before the ayahuasca, so I was kind of traumatized. Obviously, it was giving me signals that I couldn't process because I was all in my head back then. But like, for you to kind of allow yourself to go on that ride, I don't know, it seems a little advanced.
That's the importance of having a really good guide. You know, the shaman had been doing it for 40 years. So she really coached me through the mantra of the psychedelic explorer: witness and allow, and gave me metaphors. She's like, listen, you're going to be in a movie theater, and it's going to be a full 4D movie theater where you're going to experience these things somatically, and you're going to see things. And your job is to just sit in the seat and eat popcorn and let it happen, you know, and not try to do anything. And that really stuck with me. I was like, all right, movie theater, like I can do this. I'll hold my rock. I'll sit in the movie theater. I'll watch what happens. And, you know, it's just the right kind of energy and the right words. And she was sitting there right with me. So I felt really comfortable, obviously only at the start. And then she left after a little while so I could have my own journey on my own. But it was, I really give a lot of credit to her as a guide. And as you know, the importance of like the ayahuasquero and the curanderos and curanderas, like the people who are officiating ceremony, they're incredibly important, and they can make all the difference. So doing some truffles in Amsterdam, or I guess you could do mushrooms back then when you did it. That's just it's a different game, you know, because you don't know how much you took. You don't know if you took too much. You don't know if you took not enough. You're not probably in the optimal environment. So that's not the ideal way to get your feet wet. And for a lot of us, it's the only way. And just following some of these same guidelines: witness and allow, be in the movie theater, you know, make sure you do your research on the dose, and hopefully have somebody who can at least sit for you, even if they're not an experienced guide or shaman. Just be there and be like, hey man, it's all going to be all right. And if you get some ideas in your head, like the room is bugged and people are after you, which I call like the usual freak out that people have, you know, some kind of paranoia that comes up, they can be like, listen, man, you're experiencing the usual. Like, don't worry about it. It's all good. We got you. And that'll make all the difference.
Yeah, it's really good advice. I did the typical Amsterdam thing. I was on a canal, did the whole tub of the raw mushrooms, and then it all kicked in. We barely made it back to the hotel room, me and my buddy, you know, as the wallpaper was coming off the walls, and then we got back. But again, no guidance. And then when I went back in later, I had great guidance. Like you said, I had a shaman, or, you know, someone holding the space. I had a guy named Simon Powell on the show back in the day. I think he has a book called The Psilocybin Solution, and he always said, I remember he said it really loud in the episode. He said, be with it. Whatever it is, be with it. And I remember his words echoing back to me, even in ceremony, which is always hard to believe that you'll ever be able to remember those lessons, you know, when you're in the experience. But be with it. So don't try to force it away. Don't even try to run away from it, or don't even hope it's over. Be with it. For me, it's usually a lot of emotions and pain, and I just got to be with it and then breathe. That's my equivalent of your rock, I think. For me, it's just breathe. when you breathe, if you keep breathing, you're always going to be okay. So
it's such an important lesson. I mean, anything you resist persists. That's the old Marcus Aurelius quote, right? But it's so true in psychedelics. And psychedelics are like a microcosm. It's like our little Doctor Strange world where we get to work out how we might deal with the regular, normal waking world when we're in these experiences. So we learn that thing that we put so much resistance into is going to be fueled by that energy. So if you're having a dark vision, a dark experience, like the worst thing you can do is try and change it. The best thing you can do is just love it and try to appreciate the beauty of that aspect of polarity, as hard as it is. I remember in my darkness retreat, which was something I'm sure we'll get a chance to talk about, which was an incredible experience, 7 days, complete darkness, complete silence. And then it unlocked what absolutely felt like, I obviously can't prove it, but an endogenous release of DMT. So I was in the vision state for about 4 days straight. Fortunately, I had a lot of experience because there would be times where I would see the most horrific things, in the blackness, in these visions. I would see like a wheat thresher that was just threshing over bodies of human beings. I would see like all of the skulls and kind of imagery of destruction and death. And of course, like you want to turn away, but there's no way to turn away. You're not even on a substance. So it's not going to go away ever unless you like sit there and then start to see the beauty of that, destruction, which then leads to creation, right? Like the death that leads to life, and that cycle. As they say in Hinduism, Shiva destroys and Brahma creates. Like that is the cycle of life. And until I was able to just appreciate that, then the wheat thresher goes away, and then the rainbow comes in, and I'm sitting in a beautiful meadow with beautiful trees and flowers that are blooming and bees, and it just changes the minute that I can apply appreciation and love. And it's just like the medicine and your own consciousness is creating this experience for you to experience a lesson, to learn how to love that thing which you judge, that thing which you find abhorrent. Can you love that too? And that's the question it's asking you. And if you say, yes, I can, then it's like, good job, son. Like, we'll carry on. Here's your reward.
And like you said, you can bring that stuff into the real world too. And when you get into these uncomfortable situations, you can be like, well, first of all, it's not a tenth of what it feels like when I'm in situation, but now I can be like, yeah, like you said, learn from it. Can you be with it anyways? What's the lesson here? Yeah, all that stuff. Let's talk about the dark experience, because I mean, we're here. We might as well go into all these experiences. I heard you talk a little bit about on one of your podcasts. It quickly made me remember something. So I've had a guest on London Real maybe 5 or 6 times. His name is Master Mantak Chia. And I don't know if you've ever heard him. Funny enough, he's got our most popular clip on YouTube with like 5 million plus views. And the first time I had him on my show.
Love sex.
Yeah, people love sex, and like I'm from a American Puritan upbringing, and we didn't talk about sex much in my house in San Diego, even though I think my mom had the Joy of Sex book, which made me uncomfortable. But when he came on my show, he was talking about massaging the organs and the 3 gates for the women and multiple orgasms for men, and I was literally in the chair like I could barely make it through the episode. And then I started listening and learning his stuff. I was like, this guy actually knows what he's talking about. And on the 4th episode in, he said that his master I think he grew up in Thailand actually. They used to do the darkness retreat to create DMT in their heads as well. And I had never heard him talk about this. I mean, again, I think we had to build a relationship up, and he said, yeah, we used to black out this room, and they used to go in the caves back in the day, and they would do the endogenous release of DMT. And this isn't like a psychedelic guy. I don't think he's had ayahuasca ceremonies. And he described it in such a detail that I believed him. And so then now that you talk about it, it's really interesting. So that's my only context of the darkness. Can you tell me about your experience and how you did it? And have you ever heard of someone in the East talking about that?
I have, and it's just one of those things. People go into a cave, but you don't really understand the reason for the cave until you start to dive a little deeper and understand this is a part of so many different mystical traditions. And actually, the person who is facilitating for me in the darkness, she studied in the Hindu tradition, and she was meditating with her guru for 10 years. And then the guru, after doing it, what she calls the hard way, meditating for 10 years, and then opening up her vision state, and was able to, see the deities and kind of interact in that, what we would call the astral plane, right? then her guru is like, okay, now go into this cave. And she goes into the cave. And then within a few days, she's just permanently in that space. And she got out and she said she was pissed off. She was like, what do you do to me? You made me meditate for 10 years and then you send me to the cave and it's so much easier. It just happens. And he's like, yeah, I wanted you to learn how to do it on your own first before you had this tool that could help bring it to you. So really what you're doing is you're blocking out absolutely all light. So when people think, oh, it's like solitary confinement. No, it's not, because in solitary, it's far more maddening because you have a little bit of light that you can fixate on. So instead of being in this womb of darkness where everything is absolutely enrobed and it feels infinite unless you bump into something, you focus on the light. And I remember when they actually shut the doors and turned off all the lights, there's one little crack that was coming through the window. I guess one of the seals opened up. So I like ring the bell and come in, and it takes them a while for them to like get used to the light, the darkness as well. So they can see that little crack and then they can fix it, put a piece of like black tape over it, because I was already fixating on that thing. You know, that one little prick of light was too much. It ruined the whole experience. And so they block everything out. You're in absolute silence, absolute darkness. You memorize the room first. The food is dropped in a blacked out hallway outside of the room. They ring a bell. You open up the door, stumble your way around, get the tray. And it was really, you know, pretty bland food, raw vegan, just enough sustenance.
Where are you, by the way?
I'm in near Frankfurt, Germany. So a house that they kind of made for this in Frankfurt.
Why there, and who's they?
So there's only about 30 darkness retreats in the whole world. There's not that many. And this one seemed to be the best. Now, the ones in the US, there's, you know, somebody's attic in Ohio. And like there's nothing really here in the US. And then there's actual caves. If you go down to Guatemala, you can go into a real cave and do it that way. But you're sleeping on, you know, pretty much the ground of the cave with a little like straw. Like they made it real traditional. In Europe, in Czech Republic in particular, it's actually used as a therapy for psychiatric conditions. So they call it therapy nui or something like that. And so it's actually the majority of the retreats are in Europe. And this one just happened to be in Frankfurt, which seemed to be the best. And my friend Akshay, who is the one who told me about it, you know, really like explained having been there and having done it. And he actually went to my high school. We did a podcast together, and that kind of got me excited about it. I had that calling, that kind of feeling I had when I first went to do ayahuasca, like, oh, I have to do that. He was the one who gave me, and this is the place he went. So we go to this little town called Sachbenwalden outside of Germany. The website's darknessretreat.net, I think, something like that. And beautiful little place. And, you know, such a lovely facilitator who's like deeply steeped in the practice, you know, learned from her mentor, her guru, and then been practicing for a while. And just a beautiful like Airbnb vibe, you know, simple, but a nice little Airbnb vibe. Everything's blacked out, but there was a window that you could open for fresh air because they didn't have a lot of ventilation in there. So you had to open the window. So you had one of those mindfold masks, which is like a psychedelic explorer's essential. The mindfold blocks out absolutely all light. It's this foam thing. You can leave your eyes open or closed. Like so at some point, yeah, exactly. So I would open the window just to get fresh air, which was also something that was difficult because when things got hard later on, I could think like, all I got to do is open the window and look out and all the visions will stop. Like all the challenging shit will end. But fortunately I didn't do that. But yeah, so that's the setup in the room. And like, so I memorize everything, figure out where the toilet is, you know, figure out where my clothes are, where the essentials are, kind of get it all sorted. It ended up going a little haywire because I memorized everything based upon a rectangular rug that was in a rectangular room. And at some point I shifted that rug, I guess, moving around. So the rectangular rug was at an angle to the room. So I was running into shit for like the last 4 days of the whole retreat because my bearings were off. But so that's the room. The first few days, nothing happens from the visionary state. It's just the monotony of the darkness and the silence. And I'm just thinking about things, going through having hypothetical arguments with people that, you know, I have grievances with, trying to plot out I decided everything. I was going to move houses in Austin. I changed careers 3 times. I like started 7 projects. I quit 5 things. Like I was just working through all this stuff, trying to solve all of my internal angst externally, which was, you know, what we normally do. And then about the night of day 3, I started getting these flashing, blinking lights in my eyes, just like a pulsing, flashing light. And I was like, all right, that's interesting. And then by day 4, the visionary state opened up, and it was like the twilight of ayahuasca. It wasn't full on peak where you just feel like the light pouring through the top of your head, that kaleidoscope, that chrysanthemum that's just this menagerie of colors and beasts and different things that are coming. It wasn't quite that intense, but it was like the kind of the come down or the come on of that experience. And it just stayed consistently for the next 4 days. And I had my Aura ring tracking my sleep. I was sleeping maybe 2 hours a night. I didn't know what was day or night. I knew that there was some roosters that I could hear, but they seemed to crow at all different types of the times of the day and morning. So I was just in there, and I had some incredibly profound visions and experiences that, stick with me as so real and so like instructive and valuable. I really credit the Darkness Retreat as probably my most transformative psychedelic experience, at least in the last, 7 years or so.
Wow. So it's almost like a little Vipassana in there too. And have you done that? Vipassana, I guess for people that don't know, and I haven't done it, but it's 10 days, no talking, no devices, no distractions, and you meditate a lot. But again, of course, there's light and there's people around. But, I know Tim Ferriss has said that was as challenging, if not more, than one of his hardest psychedelic experience. So you kind of have that too in the dark, right?
Yep, you do. Because you're not talking to anybody. You don't have any sound. You don't have anything to do. You don't have any sight. It's a complete restriction of all of your senses, except for the sense of touch and taste when you're eating the food. But as I said, the food was really bland, which I understand why they had the food like that. Because when you're in the visionary state, like nobody in their right mind would eat food at the peak of an ayahuasca journey, or at like the peak of a mushroom journey. It's the last thing you want to do. But at the peak of this visionary state, I would eat food, and I would absolutely see the food that I was eating. So I would eat a mushroom, and I would see these mushrooms like coming up, pushing up out of the ground in my third eye, like crystal clear. I would eat a broccoli and I would see it. But everything though, I would soap up, I would go take a shower and soap up, and I would see the suds just flood my third eye vision. I would take a shit and I would see the feces as I was like shitting it. It was unbelievable, the access I had with that kind of endogenous DMT, which they say comes from the flood of melatonin from all your photoreceptors being shut off. And so the contrast of your photoreceptors usually being activated and limiting your melatonin to then being completely shut off and producing a ton of melatonin, which is triggered by the darkness, which is one of the reasons why we restrict blue lights before bed, et cetera, to get more melatonin. But you get a flood of it, and then somehow in the chemical process, the melatonin converts to DMT, is what they said. But of course, it would require a vivisection of the brain to actually see if that was happening. And I don't think anybody's signing up for that program, but it was unreal.
And pretty predictable. I mean, the people that go to this retreat, does this happen to everybody or most people?
That's what I hear. I haven't, she said that this is usual. Now for me, it happened a little bit sooner. Some people it's around day 5. So they always recommend you're in there for a week. But for me, it was day 3, and I'm grateful because actually the first few days with nothing happening were harder, which makes me think that with a Vipassana, that would also be incredibly challenging because you can still see, you still have access to a variety of different things, and the vision state isn't open. I mean, the one thing about being in the vision state is not boring. Like you're dealing with stuff. I was reconciling stuff with my father. I had a vision of Buddha that came to me and brought some wisdom. You have these things that are happening, different souls, different connections that you're able to have with people who you love or people who have passed. Like it's infinitely interesting, which I think, the challenging part of the Vipassana is just the kind of sitting with your thoughts without the access to that kind of spiritual dimension, which was actually beneficial. Now, challenging for sure, but also not monotonous.
Yeah, I'm just having flashbacks to my vision states, So my first 3 ayahuasca ceremonies were actually done at the old London Real Studios, and the shaman actually came there, and we would do it overnight, and she would sing, and she was the best shaman because when I would get sick, I would run in the bathroom, and I would lock the door, and I would purge in there. And she would just keep singing in the other room. She, you know, a great shaman doesn't knock on the door, doesn't ask if you're okay. She just kept the space and allowed me to do that. But once I had my difficult woodshed moments and purged, I was always in that state that you're kind of talking about, where then I'm kind of just going out and the trauma's kind of gone, and I'm now just looking at all the amazing possibilities in the universe in my life. And I remember just laying on my bathroom floor, which felt like, you know, felt like the presidential suite at the Ritz or something at that point, and like having those moments.
Yeah. And then, you know, you realize that a lot of the things that you were thinking about in your waking life, like everything I decided for the first 3 days, by day 5, when I'm in the vision state and have access to that superpower that we get when we have that kind of clarity from the shift in perspective, it was like, oh, I don't need to do any of this stuff. Like, my life is amazing. And that was the overwhelming lesson, is how absolutely incredible and blessed and beautiful my life is, and how sad and how much grief I felt for not enjoying my life the way I could, because I'm always thinking about something I did in the past I could have done better, something I could do in the future, you know, that I could plan for and plot for. But in the present moment, my life has been and is absolutely stunning. And, you know, I hadn't spent nearly enough time appreciating that. You get used to things, and then your mind will start wandering to the past or the future. And so that was the real gift of this, is when that blindfold came off, I was just sobbing, just weeping, looking at the beautiful world that I had access to, like the visions that I was able to see and hear and do and explore. And also the sadness of recognizing I'd let so many of the moments of that, like that in my life, just pass me by. So if I look back now, I have one singular regret. The only regret, I wouldn't change a thing, because I've learned so much from everything, all of the mistakes, all the failures, all the explorations. The only thing I would change is just to take more time to enjoy my life in the present moment and just really appreciate everything that I have, because it's, as I said, it's absolutely stunning. And that's the case for most of us. You know, our lives are just an absolute gem, and we're just not there appreciating it.
Well said. You mentioned that experience was like more powerful than anything in, say, the past 7 years in the psychedelic realm. I was wondering if you could maybe talk about, you know, the past 10 years of your experiences, and I'll just quickly share mine. I mean, after those 3 ceremonies for me in 2012, and I had the first one, which again was really out of my comfort zone, but I got a few lessons about, you know, I was dating a woman at the time, and she had a daughter, and I was seeing them, but I made a decision then to like move into them and start a family and bring them into my life. And I forced myself to do 2 more ceremonies that year, because I knew it was uncomfortable, but I knew I had to go in and just force myself to come to terms with some more things, and your parents' divorce and a lot of that stuff. And so I did that year. And then I played around with some psilocybin, you know, I listened to Terence McKenna. I did some big doses, like 4.5 grams, I think, as big as I did. And I had some experiences, but a lot of it was machine elves and digging in my brain. And I never got those lessons that I got from ayahuasca. And, you know, I tried DMT a couple times, but that was it. And then I stopped. And it wasn't until 2 years ago that I went down to Soltara, and we were going to make a movie, and I went down with Dennis McKenna. And so, of course, when I'm making a movie or doing a show, then I'll go do it, right? So whatever it takes. But I got, you know, 3 of the most powerful experiences of my life. I mean, one was the single most profound experience of my life. And I had an observation that, for me, ayahuasca was the only psychedelic. It was the mother of psychedelics. I mean, for me, it was the one that always teaches me lessons. I mean, literally, I have takeaways. Literally, I had like 10 things I needed to do with my life. And I know I need to go back, but I haven't been back. And I know I'm going to have to push myself to go back. So anyways, those are my experiences. I'm curious what yours are like, and what it's like to hear me say that stuff.
Well, I think you're right. I think ayahuasca is it's the mother teacher, you know, and that's what they call it in, you know, madrecito, like little mother, like the mother of all of the different plants down in the jungle. And of course they're referring to the vine, but the vine mixed with the leaves creates the brew, and that we typically call ayahuasca. But it's incredibly powerful. And I think one of the reasons why it's so powerful is it's working on 2 different aspects. One, it's working on your psyche. and helping you explore different aspects of your psyche. But the other part is the purge, which is helping release where you're storing that in the body. There's a great book called The Body Keeps the Score. And in that book, it talks about how we hold trauma in our body in different places. And I think that's something that people overlook. You know, you see a dog and a dog runs into a screen door, runs into a window, or falls off something. Immediately they shake. Well, why do they shake? Well, they shake to get all that trauma out of their fascia, get all that memory. Well, some gnarly shit happens to us. We don't shake it out. We don't ecstatic dance. We don't scream it out and go run around. Maybe we'll hit the gym and work out, and that's probably a healthy adaptation to that. But we're storing so much of this. Most of us will just cry and like huddle up in our own room and not do the natural thing, which is to get this out of our body. You know, do some intense breath work or some way that we can somatically release it. But ayahuasca is doing that for us. It's squeezing all our organs and pushing them all out, either up or down, one way or another, usually both. It's going to come out of your body as you're working the stuff out in your psyche. And there's no other plants that really do it, you know, with that kind of double action precision other than ayahuasca. And of course, the DMT as a psychedelic is pretty incredible. It's in a league of its own. It's incredible. It's really unique what it gives you access to. It feels like it goes beyond your own psyche and opens you up to something that's beyond your normal purview, like another whole dimensional access. And other psychedelics can do that, of course, and you can have that in the normal waking state as well. It's not the only thing that can get you to the access of something that seems outside of what you can normally access. But ayahuasca does that regularly. And so some of the experiences that you have from that are really second to none. And that's not to downplay the other experiences from the other plants. They all have their own incredible value. It's like, you know, you have your favorite of the Avengers, but you appreciate all of them, you know, like even Hawkeye, like he's still got his skills and he's still dope, you know, so.
Yeah, no, that's really good. Yeah. I remember I did 3 in Soltara, and the first one, it had been so long for me. And what typically happened in the past was my stomach would hurt so much during the ceremony. But also back in the day, I was drinking a lot. So I think that's why. And so this time my stomach didn't hurt. And but I always hate to purge, you know, maybe it's also my control factor. So I was like, I'm not going to throw up. I'm not going to throw up, which is the worst way to go into a ceremony. But I didn't the first time, but then the next night, I mean, for actually, after the first ceremony, Dennis McKenna and Daniel Cleland, the guy who runs it down there, came over and they were like, that was really weak medicine. And I was like, really? It seemed okay to me. So we all convinced ourselves to have like the double dose the next time. And then, of course, everything came up. It all came out. And, you know, again, that ceremony is still changing the course of my life today. And, but again, it's just such a powerful thing. And I sometimes sit in this chair, Aubrey, and I'm sitting across from massively intelligent people who have never allowed themselves to have the psychedelic experience, maybe because of cultural conditioning or emotional baggage or no access, or maybe they just didn't hear Aubrey Marcus in 2010, you know, and it never planted the seed. And they look at me and they say, I think that can be done through meditation. That can be done through breath work. And I look at them and I'm just thinking, nope. There's no way my life would have been transformed in that time period. And the time was crucial. Like, my daughter at the time was 8, now she's 16. I couldn't do it at she's 16, you know, that would have been too late. So I needed to make those changes then, and it would have taken too long with the therapy and the stuff. So I think I'm right when I say I disagree with you. I think the psychedelic experience is so important, you know, for some people.
Absolutely. Because to get to the reward for your meditation practice, just like the, you know, Bharati who runs the darkness retreat said, it took her years to actually deepen her meditation practice enough that she could experience without any assistance the kind of altered states that she had the access to now. It took her years. So for someone like us, we're not going to be able to dedicate years to our meditation practice before we even find the reward. We need to taste the reward now. And ideally we have the change that happens now, and that's what psychedelics can offer. But to expect that somebody's going to have a 5-year breathwork practice for a reward that they don't even know, that they're just taking on faith, you know, that it's really unlikely that that's going to happen. And I do think that you can get there with enough of a dedicated practice and just really making this a primary goal of your life. But it's not practical. It's not pragmatic for most of us. And psychedelics can drop you into that state and start to heal things, start to give you those transcendent experiences, which are probably the most significant source of healing that we have. Like the research being done by Johns Hopkins, they're studying what the effect of a single dose of psilocybin is on somebody. And the effect spans, like you said, a lifetime. So what is it that's healing? It's not the actual drug itself, because it's completely out of your system in a day, 2 days, a week, whatever. So what is it that heals? Well, it's the transcendent experience. And psychedelics can reliably give you a transcendent experience, which can absolutely alter the course of your life. So can breath work and meditation, but maybe 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road, if you continue on that path. And good for you if you do that. It's not that you can't get there that way, but to have that transcendent experience now, like you said, when your daughter's 8 instead of 16, that is a massive difference, a massive difference. And the benefit is just completely exponential. She'll feel that for her whole life. You felt that for your whole life, all of those years. I mean, it makes a strong case for the responsible use of psychedelics to those people who are called to it. And I think, as the information gets out there, as legalization comes about for MDMA and psilocybin, I think more and more people are going to be called to this medicine just because it has so much potential.
And it has its own built-in barriers to entry, and thank God that it does, which is why I haven't run back for 2 years, because, as I said to Dennis before I went in, I'm feeling some trepidation. And he says, if you don't, that means you're not paying attention. So, it definitely has those built-in pieces to make it to where you have to earn it, I guess you would say, or, you have to be ready to go to a lot of places. And so it's not something that easily can be abused, whatever that means. And I'm never one to tell someone how to take their psychedelics, but I would agree that, having them on a canal in Amsterdam might not be the best use of that for a specific purpose. So yeah, I agree with you. I think they're an incredible piece of technology for the human soul and the human race. And I'm just so glad that we're talking about it. There's amazing people out there funding studies. We got the folks here at Imperial College. We've had pretty much all of them on the show. They're doing great work. And, just imagine kids these days, when they were your age for the Vision Quest, now they can go on and, research articles, and maybe it's legal in certain states, and there's podcasts, and now they can really get an education. So yeah, it's powerful.
I think it's when I look at everything that's troubling and challenging in our world right now, and then I look at the optimistic case, like what gives me real hope, and it's the psychedelic renaissance. Things will change when people change. There's not going to be a charismatic leader who's, drank ayahuasca 50 times and gets elected as president and comes in as like, what, we're changing everything. Like, that's unrealistic. It's not going to happen because, the leadership lags what the people demand. That leader will come when the people demand it. So what's going to change the way that the people feel, how they love one another, how they think about their own life and how they think about the world? Can they appreciate their life enough that they want to actually give back to it? I think that's part of the problem that we have, is just this lack of gratitude. Like we just kind of ignore the beauty of life and our fellow humans and everybody else around us, probably because we don't feel that we have enough worth to give back to them. It's one of those like laws of reciprocity. So if we actually take in and absorb how much the earth gives us, well, then we'll be compelled to give back to the earth. But we don't want to do that. So we just ignore it. We take it for granted. And then we don't feel that push of reciprocity. But when you do the plants, you start to feel these things. And then now that they're coming online, both legally in our country, hopefully pretty soon, and then in the world, in all the places like Soltara, all of these different opportunities coming online, I think it has a chance to dramatically shift large portions of the population. And when that happens, I think that population will demand different leadership, and we can enter a new era. So, it gives me a lot of hope. If there was, this is Gandalf coming in, and movie 2 from the Fellowship of the Ring, when the orcs are just about to take over the stronghold and it all looks lost. And it's that dawn of the 5th day, and he comes riding in on a white horse, and his staff is held up in the sky, and the sun hits it. It's like, oh shit, like it's gonna work out. To me, I think psychedelics have that potential. And I know that sounds like a crazy story, but I've seen what it's been able to do in my life and so many other lives. I mean, your story is another example of this. it's made dramatic shifts in individuals. I've watched people heal so much trauma from all of these different medicines and then open themselves up to love and, the desire to help and share and be charitable and just change the way that they operate within their own lives and operate within society. And so when this gets to scale, I think it has the power to really change everything. And that gives me a ton of hope and enthusiasm.
And I had a similar conversation with Dennis McKenna after our third ceremony. We were in the cloud forest there in Costa Rica, and we were talking about, like, how is there more of this, or how can you get the message out? But one of the things he said is that it is hard to scale this stuff. There's only 30 people you can get in the Malacca in Soltara, and so that's the only thing that concerns me, because I completely agree with you, but I also worry, like, is there enough access for enough people? Now, maybe we only need to shift 1% of the population, the Maharishi effect, but that concerns me. Does that concern you?
When it concerns ayahuasca, there's a rate limiting factor because it's a plant that's slow growing. The vines don't grow fast. It's not like you put ayahuasca in the ground and it's like corn. You got an 8-foot stalk, by springtime. It doesn't work that way. So, I mean, it can start to be cultivated so that we have more supply, and we could do it in Hawaii. We can do it in lots of different jungle that we're just burning down, wantonly right now. We could actually make a concerted effort and expand it, and then different healers get trained up in the process. But I don't think that's what's going to hit at scale. I think that's going to be something that people who are truly called to it find that experience. But what will get to scale are MDMA and psilocybin, because both of those are synthetic. So just as readily as, someone can push out Advil, they could push out MDMA or psilocybin if they just tune the machines to create those compounds. And those have incredible potential. And the studies are panning out and showing that as well. But they can reliably create these same transcendent experiences within a container that actually facilitates that. So that's what I think is going to get us to scale. Ketamine is another one that's really interesting. And I think people are not using that in the most optimal way to actually unlock the potential of what that medicine is. But it's at least coming online for the treatment of depression, and different people are starting to explore it. But these synthetics, I think, will really carry the bulk of the weight. Because when there's that clinic that's just right down the street from you, and somebody goes who you wouldn't expect goes, they just take the chance and they go to have that clinic. They have their MDMA psychotherapy, and then they go back to their construction site, or they go back to their bank job, and they're like, yo, right here off Main Street is a clinic. You'll go and you'll love your life. You'll love your family. You'll love the world more than you ever have in your life. And you're going to feel better than ever. And they're going to be glowing and exuding this energy from every cell. Like, people are going to be like, oh, I want that. I want some of that. So I know that when this gets across the legalization line, which is close, it's got fast track status from the FDA. It's almost available for compassionate care right now based on the post-traumatic stress results, which they're permanently curing 2 out of 3 people with treatment-resistant post-traumatic stress, which is unbelievable. Curing them in 3 sessions. In follow-up studies, they stay cured for years, which is unlike anything that's being offered in the pharmacopoeia of different drugs that are now treating this. Like, we're not creating cures, we're creating dependencies, but this is creating cures. So that's going to be available. And I think it's going to spread fast, and it's going to spread at scale. I don't think there's going to be enough facilities. I think we're going to have, for a while, 3-month, 4-month, 5-month wait lists as soon as this gets out. And people are like, whoa, because I've been fortunate enough, these have been going on underground for a while, these MDMA assisted psychotherapy sessions, a male facilitator, female facilitator, a blindfold playlist that's specified, a series of different ways that you facilitate the experience. I've watched people who had no recollection of sexual abuse when they were younger, or any kind of just trauma, didn't remember their childhood at all. I've watched them go through the entire healing process in 5 hours, and it's changed their life. Followed up with them, and I've watched that happen, and I know that's going to be available. And that's just one of the medicines. That's not going to give you the visionary kind of transcendent experience, but it's going to heal everything that's in your heart. And I think that's all happening. and it's going to be sooner than we think. So, it's in a way right now, things are a little bit darkest before the dawn. And, as long as this stays on the course on the track that it's on, I think the dawn is coming.
Yeah, I love that observation. And I look forward to, everybody loves going to spas these days where you go and you get the massage and all this other stuff. And, why not also have the psilocybin experience in this room and the MDMA experience in this room, when you go to the mountains in Colorado or you go to Switzerland, or like you said, if it's down the street. And again, just having the access and the legality, it's a big difference. I remember I had Howard Marks in here, who's the famous, weed smuggler from Britain, who's now left us. And he said something really interesting. He said, I have friends that won't do drugs because they're illegal. And it was just an interesting observation I hadn't heard before. And this is a guy who probably hung out with a lot of people that smoke pot, but he said that was a barrier for a lot of people, just that thing. But knowing that it's down the street and it's okay and it's legal and it's acceptable, yeah, I agree. I think it'll make a big difference in a lot of people's lives. And yeah.
Sure. And people still have a ton of faith in the letters MD, and so if you go down and your first consultation is with a doctor, an MD, and they can wear the doctor costume and put on the lab coat and the white outfit to make you feel comfortable and let you know that this has clinical research that shows benefit. And then you get with the facilitators and do it. People are going to have an absolutely different level of comfort. And I think that's going to change a lot of people's minds, people who are super resistant to this, because I think most of that is just excuses. People are afraid of what they're going to uncover as soon as they break that thin veneer that's holding all of this stuff in their psyche in. They're, as soon as they crack the ice, they're afraid everything's going to flood out. I think that's the real fear behind psychedelics. I actually think that's why it's legislated against as well. Politicians are scared of this medicine, so they make it illegal so they don't have to even think about it, and they don't have to ever do it. And they don't have to talk to somebody else who's done it either. And so instead of it being this grand conspiracy, I think it's just people who are scared to actually peer inside, the same trepidation you felt, but you had enough courage and enough desire to go in there and find it, where other people are like, no, let's just legislate against this. Let's lock this thing down. And that way I never have to worry about it. And I never have to see the truth of what's inside.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I think also politicians, it's just unpredictable behavior. When you can create an economic system and a religion and all that, it's like a predictable society. Unfortunately, it's predicting us right into a bad narrative. So I agree, when they open that up, I think they'll see that actually this is going to get us to the right place much quicker. So good. You made me feel good today and optimistic. I'd love to ask you about this crazy 10-year chapter of your life that's called On It. Like I said, with that 2010 broadcast with Rogan, I don't think On It existed yet. And then the next year you started, and then I know you just left as CEO in March. And so maybe this is a great time to ask you, and it's probably worth a 6-hour show, but when you look back at that 10-year period, and again, you look really young on that show, what did you learn? What did you create? What were some of those like highs and lows for different reasons? And how do you view that period of your life, and how will you describe it to your grandkids one day?
It was the wildest experience, because I was 31 when I started On It and 30-ish actually. But it really started going in July of 2011. That's when we launched Alpha Brain and really took off. But I'd done a bunch of different things. I had a marketing company. I was in investor relations and working for all different kinds of clients, nutraceutical clients. There was even a pharmaceutical company that was working on ovarian cancer treatments with immune therapy for ovarian cancer out in Alberta, Canada. I was working with them. I was, selling Fleshlights, that male sex toy. That was one of my clients. I did absolutely everything, but I wasn't satisfied or successful in particularly anything. And I tried to launch little small projects on my own. Nothing had really worked out. So I really started to lose faith that I was ever going to get there. And also I had no significant platform at all. I wasn't putting out the ideas. I mean, I was 12 years from doing my vision quest, and I was telling people I would meet who are my friends, but I still wasn't able to get those ideas out at scale. So I felt frankly depressed, really down that I was never going to actually be able to build something that was significant, that helped people, and have a platform that could reach people. And I had so much to share, and I felt, and so much that I'd experienced, the ways that I'd trained, the friendships that I'd had. I had a really close friendship with Bodie Miller, who was one of the most decorated skiers in men's history. And, just watching him train and training with him, and the fighters that I knew and everybody I knew, and also my experience with supplements that had started when my stepmom started giving me supplements when I was a basketball player. And I had so much to offer, from everything intellectually to all the tools. And I just wasn't able to get it out. And I didn't think I ever was. And so I created a company. I was partying a lot, part as a coping strategy to help with this. And I was partying hard. I didn't get into the traditional like hard drugs like cocaine or any of that, but I was going for it. I was drinking hard. And I actually read somewhere about Blackbeard the pirate would drink gunpowder before he'd go into battle and make him feel euphoric. So I did some research, and I would actually drink gunpowder and rum and just be wild as like a way to feel something, because I just felt kind of purposeless and hopeless. And, I'd make enough money to get by with all of these different clients. And then, I decided to make hangover supplements because I was partying so much, and that was like my primary need, and it wasn't going well. Like at that point, now hangover supplements are kind of like a big thing, but then nobody cared. And my supplements were super premium. They weren't something you'd find in a gas station. So that was like failing. But I became friends with Joe Rogan during that time. And after that show that you're talking about, so after that, we're sitting around his house, we're playing pool. And I'm like, hey man, I'm making these hangover supplements, but like, what supplement would you like the most? He's like, I'd like a cognitive enhancer, a nootropic. And I was like, all right, man, I think I can make the best one that's ever come to market. And he's like, all right. And he just kind of smiles. And then I just got to work and started contacting every doctor, researcher I could find, starting doing the primary research, put together a sample formula that was way too fucking strong, like way too strong, but it's perfect for Rogan because he's a savage. So I sent it to him, and it just was, you could really, really feel it. And what it was really activating, it was elevating the neurotransmitter acetylcholine in your brain through a couple different compounds and really activating that, and then surrounding it with a bunch of different natural ingredients. And, but it kind of changed the paradigm of what you thought about with supplements, because that you can feel drugs, but most of the time supplements you just took on faith, like the brain supplements that are out. You're like, oh yeah, this is good for my brain. It'll help me when I'm older. That's what you think, but not this one. This one you could really feel. And so that was really that first moment where he's like, I fucking love it. Let's do this. And then we basically pivoted the company, and Alpha Brain was the first product. And we came out with that, formed a partnership. And I remember when we launched it, I had, took the last bit of money. So I got $50,000 from Bodie Miller and another $60,000 from Bodie, $50,000 from another contact that I had from another client. And so I had $110,000. I blew through it, wasted all of it, like literally all of it. And so I had nothing. The company was completely unfunded. I had no bank account that had any other money, but I had the person who was making the supplements, they gave me net 30, which means they would deliver the supplements, and then I had 30 days to pay them. So they delivered their first batch of Alpha Brain on net 30. So I didn't have to pay for it. And I remember I launched Alpha Brain, sold through in like 12 hours, the first batch. And so I had that money, and then I placed another order, and it was like a real hustle. It was like rolling every different sale into the next batch, into the next bigger batch, into the next bigger batch. But it was unreal. I mean, I remember I just hired as many friends who didn't have a job as possible to like just pack bottles, fill orders, handle customer service, because it was finally like my first real success. But it was almost, too good to believe it was true. So I spent probably, as everything expanded, and then we took that same idea with Alpha Brain, created different products, eventually launched kettlebells, and just kind of expanded this idea into total human optimization. But I was so used to not succeeding and so used to failing. I still believed in myself, but I was waiting for something bad to happen the whole time. So in this most exciting period of my life, I spent every day and every night stressed about worrying about what the next thing was going to happen that was going to fuck everything up and take me back to zero. And, obviously now for years. Yeah, for years. That was the way I looked at everything. So again, I wouldn't change anything. except for the fact that I would have enjoyed it. I would have like really let myself enjoy it, because that's the trick that the mind does. It's like, don't enjoy this too much because it'll hurt too bad when it gets taken away. So let's just dampen this pleasure. Let's dampen this excitement. Let's dampen this joy, keep you even keel, so that way when the shit goes wrong, it won't hurt so bad. Terrible idea.
Because you don't deserve it anyways, right?
Exactly.
Because nobody loves you and you don't love yourself.
Right. Exactly. That's the idea, because, your love is predicated on this external validation instead of actually loving yourself for the essence of who you are, your love for what you do, which you learn from your coach who loves you when you play a good game, and your dad who's like your coach, and at least that was the case with me. I play a great basketball game. He's excited. We're talking, we're joking. I have a shitty game. It's quiet in the car. He's not mean, but it's just quiet. And that quiet, the silence was devastating, and you internalize this idea that your love is predicated on how you perform. And so you're always in tension. You're always anxious about your next performance, which equates to your worthiness of love, because you've internalized this conditional love. And that was the state I was in. So it was incredible, but also I didn't enjoy it nearly as much as I could have. And I think, for anybody out there, just fucking enjoy it. If you have to take the loss, if you have to take the lumps, take the lumps. Like, don't prevent yourself from doing it. Don't dampen your excitement and your joy just in case it might hurt. Don't not love somebody with your full heart because they might break up with you. You're actually just taking the worst case scenario as a guarantee instead of just allowing it to happen and letting the contrast be the contrast. And that's like the biggest thing that I could impart on anybody, is to just not try to limit the positives of your life because you're afraid of the negatives.
That's really powerful. I appreciate you saying that. And I think one of the realizations I had down in Soltara was seeing that own pattern in my own life, where I was kind of overachieving to get that recognition and love. But what I had done since a kid is I had shut the loop back because I wouldn't allow anyone to love me. So here I was doing all this stuff, right? Which was to get the recognition. But then when you love me, I wouldn't allow it because I don't want you to hurt me. So it's this, like, I think they call it a positive feedback loop of just takes you off into madness. And so realizing that helped a little bit. And also the other thing that helped, I'll be honest, Aubrey, is having kids. So I have boys that are 3 and 4 years old, and I love them so much it like hurts my heart. And when I love them so much, the first thing I think, Aubrey, is this is going to hurt if they're ever taken away from me, more so than anything else in my life. And I've engineered a lot of my life to where I can't be hurt. And then I had to realize, but it's just, this is so amazing having him here that I'm willing to cross that bridge when it comes to it, because this is amazing. And I don't have much choice either as a father. So now I know what it's like, and I haven't seen them now for 3 weeks because they're on holiday, and it hurts. But I also know that, it hurts for a reason. So I'm learning.
That's a beautiful example. It put you in a situation where you couldn't do anything about it anyways. It was going to hurt no matter what. So you might as well love them full out, and that's a great lesson. Like, you not loving your kids might dampen the slightest amount of pain, but that's not the way to live. The way to live is to love them absolutely as fully as possible, and then take whatever whatever change, that may happen, and take that if it ever does happen. But it's the courageous and it's the right way to live our life, is to just understand that shit may happen, and that's okay. And that you'll be all right. You'll figure it out one way or another, and it may be devastating, but what's even more devastating is to be like me when I took my blindfold off and recognize how many opportunities I had to love my life and love the people in it so much more than I ever did, and I didn't do it. Like, we don't want to be that on our deathbed. We don't want to have that revelation when we're 60 and 70 and look back and be like, wow, I never loved my own life. I never loved the people in it. And I never loved this earth, because I was afraid of having to let it all go. And, that's not who we want to be. We want to be that warrior poet that's just out there savoring life so much that, we have no regrets. Hokahe, today is a good day to die. How do you get to that mentality? You get to that mentality by living so fully and loving so much that if it's your day, Hoka, hey, let's go.
And there's so many people probably listening to us right now that like, yeah, that's me. That's me, Aubrey. I have all this great stuff, which if anyone's actually listening to us right now or watching us, almost by definition, you have great stuff. You know, you're alive, your eyes are working, you have an internet connection. It's like, I bet your life is pretty damn good if you look at it in the right way. And yet some people still know they have a hard time appreciating things. Like what I said to the shaman in Costa Rica before I had the first ceremony is, I said, I feel like I'm unappreciative. That's what I said. So like, I knew I was where you're at. But knowing it isn't enough sometimes. You have to be able to do something to where, like you said, you can be that guy that can live it all. And I guess a psychedelic can help, or gratitude can help, or a practice can help, or maybe just knowing will help you get there.
All of it. I mean, awareness is the first step. Like awareness is always the first domino. And that's what you had when you talked to the shaman. I feel like I'm not appreciating things. That's awareness. So you're aware of the situation. And that's, if people can leave this today with that little bit of awareness of the areas of their life they're not appreciating, that's a huge win. And then you got to figure out, okay, what am I going to do to start appreciating that? And yeah, absolutely, the medicines can help. You know, I mean, I look back on some of the greatest experiences of my life, and 2 out of the 5, I'd have to say, were me skiing on a small dose of mushrooms. Because I'm out in the mountains, I'm with my friends, it's like beautiful, the snow's falling, I'm shredding through different, you know, terrains and exploring and laughing, and it was like just such utter joy, you know, and that those experiences are absolutely recalibrating, because then you realize how special our life is. And other times, in the hilarity of laughing in the ski lifts, this combination where we drift off into these moments of beauty as we would crest over these snow-capped peaks and see the sun like tickling through the clouds, and then we'd make a joke and just start hilariously laughing. And it was just, the life was so full in these moments. And interestingly, I did an interview with, you know, a top NFL quarterback guy. He'd won the Super Bowl, Pro Bowler. And I was talking to him, and this was when we were off air, and he's like, you know, I won that Super Bowl, right? And I was like, yeah, I know. And everybody knows. And he's like, you want me to tell you something better? It's like doing mushrooms on the beach with my friends. I was like, whoa, man, like that's a big endorsement. But it's just, even the greatest thing that we could all imagine as a warm-blooded man is like winning the Super Bowl. I mean, that's got to be up there. Like he's saying, just being on a beach with his friends with the help of that medicine gave him that experience. Now, that's not going to say that's going to happen for everybody, and that you should go take mushrooms and go skiing like me, or go to the beach and do mushrooms like, you know, like the guy I'm talking about. Almost said his name. But, you know, really, it can open up the possibility for how much the simplest things and the small things can be enjoyable in life. And I think that's important for us to recognize, that it doesn't have to be pinned to some great external thing that happens, because a lot of times these external things that happen, there's so much buildup, and when they happen, there's that moment, but then there's also the letdown that comes at the end of it, because you've been working towards it, singularly focused on it, and then there's this lull that comes. Really, so much of what's available to us just happens in the quiet in-between moments, you know, those little times where you can laugh with your partner, or play with your kids, or hang out with your buddies and really be there presently, or be out in nature, or go skiing or surfing or doing any of these different things. Like that's where the real magic lies. It lies in the gaps, you know, in the in-betweens. And there's so much available there. So finding a way to get to that is absolutely crucial. Whatever it is, like you said, whether it's a gratitude practice or a self-love practice, or, you know, just the mentality of it, or psychedelics, one way or another, we got to get to that state where we just really love our lives, love each other, and enjoy this thing, you know, because otherwise, if we don't enjoy this world, we might as well let it fucking burn. You know, so many people are living in a hell. Like this beautiful world is hell for them. They're suffering. No matter where they go, they got to bring themselves with them. And if you're that person, who cares if you're plundering the earth and burning it? Who cares? Who cares if the oceans are getting wrecked? Or it doesn't matter. It's hell anyways. Like, let it burn. But when you love it, when you really love it, then it's a different thing. And you're like, no. Like, we got to protect this thing. This is fucking amazing. Not just for me, but for everybody. It's too good. We cannot let this thing go. And I think that's the biggest thing that'll shift. And, I've certainly felt that myself, and that's that feeling, but it all comes with us. So it is crucially important that we do enjoy ourselves. We got to, otherwise, like, what's our motivation? What's our motivation to do anything if we don't love it? There's none.
So true. And like you said, our leaders are a lagging indicator on how we feel about ourselves. So if we concentrate on that, watch how our reality changes in tune. It's funny how you mentioned the beach with mushrooms. So I had Dan Bilzerian on the show, quite controversially, and that's the one thing he said was one of his greatest moments, was having mushrooms on the beach with his friends. That was one of his great moments. It's again, like, take Dan, and you might assume it was the time where the 25 girls were in the pool at his mansion, or the 25 girls in his plane, or whatever, or on his boat. But that was the thing, a couple friends, the mushrooms, and maybe the mushrooms help you get out of your head for that moment and maybe appreciate everything around you. You're connected with nature, and yeah, I feel like I could be there on the slopes right now and be appreciative of that.
No doubt.
Yeah, it's really good advice. Just to, continue or finish off on the Onnit journey, one thing that really always amazed me about Onnit was, it wasn't a one-hit wonder. It wasn't just an alpha brain story. When you tell that, a lot of people are always like, wow, I never would have thought that it was one product in the beginning, because then it was Shroom Tech, and your branding was off the chart, Aubrey, and like everything you did was just premium, and it almost looked like you could see the future in a weird way. And I know you have a great team and all of that, but still, it seemed like you were 3 steps ahead, and you were almost like Steve Jobs, like creating the product that people didn't know they wanted, and just wondering, like, looking back at that, like, how was that? Was that all your marketing experience, and then just highs and lows on that journey, and then, this year, walking away from it?
Yeah. Honestly, I was making products for myself. That was my secret. I really am well-rounded in all of the passions that I have, everything that I love to do. I love all of the physical activities. I love mental activities. I love any variety of training in so many different sports. I was great at virtually nothing, but good enough at about everything that I was experiencing so many different facets. So there were so many different desires that I had for different products in different ways. So my advantage was that I was creating products for myself. And because I was so involved in so many different activities, there was a ton of other people who were like me in some way. And so literally everything I created was something that I loved. I wasn't trying to assess a market and then create a widget to fit the need in that market. It wasn't my business hat that I was doing. I was saying, what is the raddest thing that I could make that I would use and love? And that was my guide star. And I just started knocking those down in priority of what I wanted the most. So that's honestly continued. It's like, what do I want the most? Well, I would like some high protein snacks. That's one of our latest products, right? Like, because we've knocked down so many other categories where Onnit is just an absolute part of my everyday life. Like, people have asked, like, what are you going to do? What's your relationship with Onnit going to be like? And yes, my management of Onnit is going to be different now that I'm not the CEO, but I'm still taking every product, like every day, still training with the tools. Like, me and Onnit are inexorable because I've built it to serve my needs. And, fortunately, so many other millions of people out there, their needs as well, because we're all a lot more similar than we are different ultimately. And that was really the secret of it. But yeah, of course, a lot of hard lessons, like, if I had to sum up, some of the big moments, one moment we had early on, we had a security hack. This was when a lot of those different security hacks were coming, and we discovered it internally. And, there's big stories of Target trying to cover it up, I think, and, different people who it got exposed and then they had to apologize. And so this was all in the zeitgeist, but we found it really early. We just saw them as soon as they got in, didn't even know if they got to any data. But I made the choice then, like, what Onnit stood for was radical vulnerability, authenticity, truth. We would just share the reality of what it was, because that's who I was as a human being. And that's what Joe is as well. It's like, we're going to express the truth. So I made the choice to just go out and tell every one of our customers, like, hey, this is what happened. We don't think anything happened. But that was kind of a really radical move at the time. I think that's something that it's in the zeitgeist now, and a lot more companies would do it. But stepping out like that, I think it really engendered a lot of trust. So what was this thing that was absolutely seemingly catastrophic? Oh, our customers are never going to trust us. This is going to be it. This is going to be that thing that I was afraid of happening. It finally happened. And I wasn't watching the defense as much as the offense, and this is my fault and all of this, but I just went out with a heartfelt, sincere apology and what we were going to do to correct it. And the response was overwhelmingly positive. We actually got more sales that day than the day before. So that was like a big moment to just say, look, just trust authentically what's going to happen. I made a big gamble with Alpha Brain when I talked to the Boston Center for Memory, which is one of the top institutes that study different pharmaceuticals and nutraceuticals for different brain functions. I talked to them about doing a clinical trial on Alpha Brain. And they told me straight up, they're like, listen, we've done 11 studies on supplements. All 11 showed no results. And we published all 11 of those studies. So we'll study Alpha Brain, but just so you know, if it turns out negative, we're going to publish it. And that would have been absolutely devastating, right? Because we have this product that we really feel is working and all the anecdotes are saying it's working. But if we have a clinical trial and it shows nothing, shows no efficacy, ooh, that's going to be tough. But I was like, I really believed in what we had, even though that the other supplements hadn't shown any efficacy. And I just pushed all the chips in. And, that was a crazy moment. I remember I knew the results were about to come out, I'd been unblinded, and I was getting a massage trying to calm my nerves. And I saw our tech calling my phone, and I just like pop up out of the table. And I just, from the moment that I heard him say my name, I could just hear it in his voice. Like I knew it was positive. And I just started again, crying. Just like the tears of joy that had actually panned out as we believed it did. That was a huge moment for us. Some of the lessons I learned, we hired some at different points, really skilled people, but they were not part of the Onnit ethos. They could be manipulative and they could be, self-serving or disparaging to their subordinates. But they had so many skills that I felt like we needed, and we weren't able to reach and find the best of the best yet, that I would allow them to continue in the company. And that cancer would just spread, and it would get wider and wider until finally I had to cut it out and get rid of it. But after every one of those experiences, I always thought, you know what, I should have let that person go sooner. I knew it. And I was just too scared because of the leverage they had and the skill set they had to let them go. And there's a saying, that I kind of started reminding myself, it's better to have a hole than an asshole. Better to have a part of your company that isn't filled than it being filled with somebody who's not of the right heart and character. So, paid the price for some of those mistakes. But everything else has been really a blessed journey. We had our periods of financial challenges where we distributed too much money and then things didn't turn out the way they did. And then we called it cash apocalypse. Our CFO just actually stood up and just walked out of the office and never came back. And we're like, where'd you go, bro? And he's like, you guys are done. We're like, no, we're not. We're going to be fine. No, he was out. We've had all of those kind of crazy moments that I think a lot of companies coming up have. But for the most part, I can look back with just a smile and a laugh at all of this because, despite my internal stress, it's really been a super blessed journey. And we've just helped so many people, and I've got to meet so many amazing people, all the fighters that I've got to interact with, all the athletes, all the top pros, people I've been able to train with at the Onnit gym out in Austin. It's been an absolute dream. If I gave a snapshot of my life to the younger Aubrey, he'd be like, damn, bro, that is the dream. That is the fucking dream. And I'd be like, yeah, it really is.
Yeah, it is like a movie, and I'm so blessed from this podcast for all the crazy people I meet, and you kind of did it through a company, and a podcast too, but it's just, it's cool to watch. And like you said, the 30-year-old wouldn't have believed it. It looks crazy, right? So you should be super proud of what you accomplished. For sure, man. It's really, really impressive to watch. And
thank you.
I know it had ups and downs, and people don't see behind the scenes and all the hard work and stress. And 180 people. 100's a lot. 50's a lot. To just get your head around and manage and It's tricky, I know, for sure. Why leave now, and what's next for the next 5 years? Or is it just a day at a time for you?
Well, really, I felt like I'd given my best stuff to On It, and there was a team that was more capable of running it at this point, than me. And I'm fortunate enough, our CEO is someone I've worked with at On It for 6 years, so I didn't have to go out and hire somebody else. He came in 2014. And he's just a phenomenal human who's heart first, but I've never met anybody who's more diligent and works harder. And he used to run like the top hotel in Wisconsin. And so he's used to that kind of customer service kind of first idea of like really serving people and really solving any of the problems with a lot of heart. And that's just the way he does it. And so he was the clear choice to replace me because, not only does he have the skills running all of these different aspects of a hotel business, and then he can hire the people with the supplement experience and all of the different regulatory experience, and we have a great team for that, and he can hire all the other people, but he leads with his heart. And so knowing that I had him and knowing that he was going to put in that 12 14 hours a day necessary as a CEO, and I wasn't. I'm doing my podcast, I'm doing, I have this amazing mastermind, which has been one of the most fulfilling things I've ever done. I have the books that I'm writing, and I really was called more to that. And of course I love the product development and I love the relationships, and I'm going to continue doing that. But just handing the keys officially over to him was, one of the best decisions, and the company's been thriving since. And I think it's nice to have a CEO who is that guy that's going to show up earlier than everybody and leave later. Now, of course, with COVID, we're at limited staff in the office anyways, but he's still there. Like I know when I go there into my office to podcast, I go to work out, I can pop in and I'm going to see him, because he's just always on the game. And that's what this company deserves. And I wasn't able to offer that to them. So it was better for me to step out. And yeah, and as I said, writing, podcasting, and then this mastermind, which started as a mastermind, but it's now, I call it the fellowship, has been something that's really kind of changed my ideas about another thing that I want to offer. So I think one of the things we're all missing is this sense of community, a sense of tribe. We all used to be in bands of under 150 people. They call that the Dunbar number. It's about the maximum amount of people we can truly give a fuck about. And that's what tribes organized around, is this 150 people or less. And so that's where we put the cap on the fellowship, and we have an application process, and we kind of view people and see, if they're ready to join, just a true fellowship where you're able to sacrifice some of your own personal, grievances and just open up and hold a container of just love and support for everybody, and just allow that reciprocity to flow. And we don't do psychedelics together, but we'll do as much as we can on the transformational side. So like heavy Stan Groff-esque shamanic breathing, we'll do the ecstatic dance workouts, ecstatic dance routines. We'll do the Temescal, like sweat lodges, and all of the different transformational practices that are really bonding this group together. And it's just been rad. We call it the Fit for Service Fellowship because it's training us to all become more fit for service. But it feels like a little mini Camelot, where we're bringing in outside coaches and musicians, but we have our crew, and then everybody's just sitting at this giant round table, and it's just this massive group of people that are just absolutely there for each other. And I think this is just one group, but I think it's a model. It's like the blueprint, it's like the beta test for one thing that I think is hugely missing in our society, which is that feeling that you have a crew that has gone through some shit with you, and that's one of the reasons that plant medicine ceremonies are so great. You get so close to people because you've puked in buckets with each other and gone through and cried in front of each other and gone through all of these processes. But to really feel like you have a tribe, I think is something that we'll all need to kind of reform and rearrange for the human being to actually feel like it has a sense of belonging and knows and is grounded into this kind of wild modern world. Because otherwise we'll attach to all of the dark impulses of tribalism, which is like, these are my people and I hate everybody else. It's like my people versus your people. And that's getting smaller and smaller, and all the identity politics and everything else that's coming along with that. It's all, I think, in my opinion, caused from the absence of a true tribe, where you have your people that you've gone through all of these different transformations with. And it's not that you hate everybody else besides your people, but it's just that you know that you belong to something, that you have people who see you and can hold up that mirror. You know, if you're being crazy, they can be like, hey man, you all right? Like, what's going on? You seem really angry. You know, like you have somebody who'll check you because everybody's on even footing. And so that's another thing that, you know, along with psychedelic medicine, which actually facilitates that, I really want to encourage people to find that crew, find that clan that you can go. Like I took a trip out to see Wim Hof out in Poland with a group of people, and we were doing cold plunges and climbing mountains with our shirts off and doing the breathing work. And after that, I mean, I'm as close with those guys as anybody, just from like 5 days of consistent, like rites of passage, bonds a group together. Like we know we have each other. Everybody in that group at a certain point broke down and cried about something that came up in the breath work or some challenge they had. You know, one of the guys who's jumping into a frozen waterfall couldn't even swim. So we had to be there. We're like, we got you. Like, jump in this thing. You won't drown. Like, we're there. You know, like all of these experiences that just change somebody's life. And, you know, I think that's the other missing piece. Like when we really feel like we belong to a tribe and we have the tools to expand our hearts and our minds to what's possible, we're looking at a whole different fucking world.
Yeah, it's powerful what you said there.
I guess we're wired to find a tribe no matter what. So if you can't set up a healthy, functional one, you're going to grab on to anything that looks like a tribe, right? Which could be a sports team or religion or, you know, a subsection of a gender or a Twitter handle or a political movement. And, you know, and these probably aren't going to be designed maybe as well as, like you said, something that is intentional with like a rule set, and we're here to be here for each other, and we don't do this and we don't do that. So I never actually thought about that way. And I knew when you talk to guys like in the SEALs, the Jockos of the world, they have that brotherhood. And they always seem like they have a kind of some type of grounding that maybe a lot of us just don't have, because they had that. I was in a fraternity in college. It was one of the greatest times of my life, you know. I would never give it away for anything. And if I told you what we did, first of all, I'd get canceled. And second of all, you'd say it sounds stupid, but it was absolutely amazing. I mean, it was 50 guys, at max age 22, average age 20, running our own house, cooking for ourselves, if you call it cooking. And it was this thing, and it was just amazing to be a part of that. And I missed that, you know. And it's we don't know how to do that really as adults, because there's not many good mechanisms out there to do that these days, right?
It's what's missing. You know, this is like it's a slightly more grown up version of a fraternity. And it's not that, you know, with the Fit for Service crew, like we don't go out and get drunk. Like one of the summits that we hold these 5-day summits where we go through all these experiences. It's not like we won't all go out on the town and drink, you know, mezcal in Tulum and have some fun, you know. So that's a part of it, which is what a fraternity would do. I mean, fraternities were younger and dumber, like you said. So we're a little bit more extreme with that kind of activity, but it's also adding in the other parts. It's adding in those like quiet, vulnerable parts where the stuff is coming up from deep inside, which most fraternities have, you know, we don't do. I was in a fraternity too, just focused on fun and parties and the next experience that you have, maybe some sports, which bond you. So it is a similar thing, but it doesn't go quite to the extent that it could when you have some intentionality and you add those rites of passage. So it's like, where are the modern fraternities? Where are those things that we can really feel like we have people that we can go out and have fun with? Like we go into any city. That was another great thing about the fraternity is, you know, you could go to another college, give the, you know, fraternity brothers there the handshake, and you had a place to party in any city, you know? And so like imagining like just kind of this code of different people who are interested in doing that personal, deep work, and that have like a code of ethics and an ethos, an idea, and knowing that they're going to be in all of these different cities. So even if you're traveling, going to a new city, which I think people should do more often than not, go to a new city by yourself. But if you're there and you're like, I wonder who's part of this same kind of ethos, this tribe. Let me just put up a pin on the app or whatever technology you can use. And then you get some people and you're like, oh yeah, these people are same. They've all, you know, experienced these deep transformational things. They've all looked at their shadow, you know, they've done some of the work. And then you have this kind of brotherhood that exists, or sisterhood. And I really I can see that, you know, I can see that potentially happening. and just with a little structure and organization. So yes, I'm going to be writing, I'm going to be podcasting, but if I'm thinking about what I'm most excited about, it's about creating like a social movement based around tribe and based around transformational experiences, based around shared rites of passage. And that gets me really fired up, because I just know how valuable that is in my life and everybody that I've experienced, and how it's definitely possible to cultivate that and just take some intentionality and a little bit of structure. And then I believe it's going to really catch on.
Yeah, Ashton just jumped off the screen there. So you definitely are on the right path, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I felt that vibe, for sure. I got to ask you about relationships, because you were probably one of the most vocal guys about his polyamorous journey, I guess I'd call that, over the past, I don't know, 8 years. And now you've recently gotten married, and I think are going on a monogamous journey. And maybe you can talk about that. Like I said, I think you're one of the more public guys that talked about this stuff in a space where many guys are curious. A lot of guys, well, don't know much about it, and you were always really honest, and describing it sometimes as almost like an ego-destroying experience. So maybe paint the picture and walk us through. I know I know it could be 6 hours on this, but tell me about that adventure.
Well, yeah, that was, I mean, it's a huge part of my life. Another one of the greatest learning tools that I've ever experienced, because man, I mean, I vastly overlooked how challenging it would be. So basically here's the idea, that you have to understand that I was one of those people who really validated himself a lot based on the partner that I had, based on my own sexual prowess, based on my own attractiveness, based on how many people love me. So when you're in that kind of framework, and this is a normal thing, you know, we're so many people are like this. So when you're in that framework, also I'd like different experiences, and I love people. I just love people, and I find beautiful things about different people. So I was in a lot of relationships, but ultimately I would always get kind of restless in those relationships. One, because I would exhaust all of the validation that I could get from my current partner, and I would need new validation. So I was kind of a serial monogamist. I had some longer relationships, but still that kind of pressure was pushing in. So with my partner, Whitney, you know, again, 18 months was about that time where like the pressure would start to mount, and I'd be like, I really want to go out and do something. And I wasn't someone who would cheat, just because of the pure pressure and anxiety of it. It just didn't sit right with me. And it was not something that I was willing to do. And, you know, that's a solution for a lot of different people. They're just unfaithful. And so they get that validation and they kind of cheat the system and then just bear the cost of that infidelity. It wasn't a cost that I was willing to bear. So I read Chris Ryan's book, Sex at Dawn, and it talked about how within the tribes, there was a lot of sexual fluidity, that people were allowed to sleep with each other. The Eskimos, for example, like one of the reasons we call each other Eskimo brothers was because the chief would allow guests of honor to sleep with his wife when they would come in. So there's different rules, you know, the different tribes in Africa where there were nomadic tribes, and people would go out, the men would go out and they would leave one man behind, and the man would service all of the women sexually in the whole tribe, and that would rotate, you know. So there's different ideas and frameworks around sexuality. Dr. Wednesday Martin wrote another great book called Untrue, which is good to like explore the anthropological and scientific reasons behind, you know, this kind of polyamorous look. So I had that, and I started to understand that. And then I started to understand my philosophy about love is that love and pleasure shouldn't be something that is possessed, that this is something that nobody should own. Nobody should own love. Love is like the sun. It just shines, you know, and sexuality shouldn't be controlled and owned. So I had these concepts. So I talked to my partner, Whitney, and I was like, look, I think we should go polyamorous. I think we should go open relationship. She's like, fuck that. Like, I'm out. And I was like, all right, you know, like, I gotta do this. So I was single for a little while, and then we started talking, and she's like, all right, like, I'm willing to give it a go. Like, I think I'm going to hate it, but I'm willing to give it a go. So she agreed to give it a go. And then I got a partner first in that. And I started seeing that partner, and it was really hard for her, like really hard. And I had no compassion. I was like, we agreed to this. Like, what's wrong with you? Like, why are you crying? Like, what's going on? And then, so that carried on for a little while. And then she got a partner. And When she got a partner, and I was actually away on like a spiritual dieta actually at the time. So I found out it was a crazy story, actually, which is kind of amusing. So I'm leaving on this isolation diet where I'm going to have no phone contact. I'm not going to talk to her. And she was starting to date this guy, and he was supposed to be leaving the same day as me, and they hadn't slept together. Well, I'm going to catch my flight, and on another flight, they start announcing his name. And they're like, I'm not going to use his real name. They're like, Travis so-and-so, you're about to miss your flight, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, that motherfucker stayed. He's going to sleep with my girl. I know it. But I had no way to check because we were out of contact at that point. So then I arrive, I go through, I'm thinking about it the whole time on this diet. I'm like, I know they did. I bet they did it. And then I get the call, and I was like, hey, the craziest thing, I heard him, he didn't catch his flight. Did you guys end up sleeping together? She's like, yep. And at that point I was like, okay, cool. I'll call you back. And I felt a feeling that I'd never felt before. Like I didn't know if I wanted to vomit, cry, or start punching the wall. It was like this overwhelming, like guttural response that I had. And I spent that whole day just trying to reconcile it. And it was brutal. I mean, I would think about every new position. I would think about them sleeping together in, like, oh my God, he's hitting her. He's hitting it from behind. Oh my God, doggy style. Like, and I would want to vomit again. I would think about every sexual act, and it would be this visceral response. And I started to get it. I was like, oh, I get why you were having a hard time with this. But of course I was committed. You know, I was like, I got to work through this. Like this is my own shit that I got to deal with. And so that started the journey. 5 years continued. The challenges continued, because what was the first difficult thing was the sexuality. The most difficult thing is when it started to involve love, you know, and my partner ended up falling in love with somebody at Burning Man, and I ended up, you know, having to deal with that. And I'd had, you know, significant love for somebody else as well, which was incredibly tumultuous. So not only sharing sexuality, but sharing love, which then, you know, reduces the amount of validation you have, and you feel like you're unworthy. You know, I remember comparing myself to all her partners. She would be with a great athlete, and I would start training in his sport. And then I'd realize he should be with a fighter, and I'd start hitting the bag. And I'd be like, what are you doing? You're never going to be as good as him at that. Just be you. So you learn to start to appreciate yourself for the essence of who you are, and not try to compare and compete with other people. But it's a brutal, brutal path, and it never really got easy. You get better at it, and you start to learn, to appreciate who you are, and start to appreciate the experiences that you have with people. And it's also beautiful too, because you have the freedom to explore and meet people. I actually met my wife when I was in that polyamorous experience, and we didn't have an intimate relationship, but we were at Burning Man again, the first time at Burning Man, not the time my partner fell in love. But we got to flirt and hang out, and there was just the freedom to explore different things. And I'm just so grateful that Whitney was willing to take that journey with me and explore all of these different possibilities. But after doing that for 6 years, it never really got to the point where we were deepening the relationship. When things would get kind of tumultuous, we'd always have another outlet. Be like, all right, cool. Like, we'll cool this one off. I'll go spend time with my other girl. You go spend time with your boy. And we'll come back together if we want to later. So there was always like an escape valve, you know. So like you said, like the beauty of how much you love your kids is you couldn't escape it. You know, you were in there, and you had to do the work to really love them. Well, this always gave another outlet. So I started to feel like, you know what, like I want to try a different way. And then, you know, after really getting the opportunity to connect with who's now my wife in a more intimate way, I was like, aha, like this is the path forward. And I really started to envision what union would look like, where instead of looking for things externally, like the practice was just to deepen the relationship, deepen it, explore more, you know, start, you know, looking at the work that Mantak Chia is doing, like you mentioned, and say like, all right, what are the 4 gates? I only know like the basics. Like, well, how can we take this deeper, and how can we explore further and go to the depths of what relationship is capable of in a container where we feel safe and we just feel like we're unconditionally loved. And that's been an incredibly beautiful and healing journey, to just be in that kind of partnership where I know that we're just there for each other. And this is not one of these things like we're going to get married and try it out, and if it doesn't work, like I'm all in, like burn the boats, all in. I'm riding this. We're going to ride or die together, you know, in this partnership. And there's a beautiful freedom to that. What may seem like a restriction is not a restriction. It's actually the freedom of having no other options, that no matter what happens, no matter if we get in a big disagreement or an argument, like, we're going to figure it out. Like, this is my partner. This is my person. And no matter what, we're coming back together. And so I think that whole journey is like the classic hero's journey. The classic hero's journey, you learn things along the way, and then you come back home to where you originally were. But when you're home, you're a completely different person with a completely different understanding. And I've never felt more love and more freedom than I do now with Vailana. And it's just been a beautiful fucking journey that I wouldn't trade for anything. All the difficulties that I've had, every single thing that you can imagine having to deal with, from a super aggressive lover to your partner who you love so much, falling in love with somebody, I had to deal with all of it, like every different aspect. And it was brutal and beautiful. And now I get to really appreciate, this kind of traditional monogamous concept of just you with a partner and just deepening that relationship every day.
You only appreciate and do this monogamy now because you went through all the polyamorous roller coaster? Or do you think, 39-year-old Marcus would have got there anyways, or Aubrey would have got there anyways?
No fucking chance.
Really?
No chance. I never would have been able to appreciate this without that experience. There's no way, because I wouldn't have been able to know myself. I wouldn't have been able to understand these kind of forces that are acting on me, my compulsions and desires to get validation from somebody else, to be loved, because I didn't love myself enough. And that was ultimately the thing. The only remedy that's available in polyamory, which is the biggest gift, the only remedy is self-love. The only remedy, the only thing that'll get you out of anything is self-love. You can scramble to other different partners. You can try and get it from other sources, but it won't work. The only thing that'll actually cure the pain is loving yourself. So it forces you over and over, like a stern master, like the Kill Bill guru, with the stick and the beard, just whipping you every time you don't love yourself enough. And that's what the polyamory experience was. So I think for me, was the absolute necessary and best way that I could have learned to love myself and actually be able to show up for a partner like I'm able to show up for Vi.
Can the amory work in the long term for anybody?
I really think that I was very well equipped. Out of the general population, I felt like I'm very well equipped. I have all the tools. I have the psychedelic medicines. I have the transformational practices. I have access to the best of the best. I couldn't make it work. So it gives me some doubt. And I'm sure there's people who are better than me, and they can certainly do it. But I wasn't able to muster enough to make it really work with everything. And I put my whole heart into it. I really went for it. I couldn't make it work. So it's incredibly challenging. I think it can work, but it's going to require two people who are at a level of mastery that's pretty exceptional. And that will exist. And I think that'll actually exist more and more as more people kind of do the work and kind of open themselves up to the truth and love themselves deeper. I think it's going to become more available and more pragmatic as time evolves and as people evolve. But I think right now it's really difficult. I also think there's some of the tribal dynamics that are hard. Like if you look anthropologically at all of these other different societies that are doing this, they had, again, those small tribes that they've gone through rituals with. So what I experienced as well, when my partner was sleeping with somebody who I was friends with, who I loved, it was way easier. But when it was that random fucking guy that I didn't know, that was just getting drunk and going out and they were just having rowdy sex, like that was brutal. And what I liken it to is this idea, like, let's say you had a new Lamborghini and you loved it. If your good homie was like, hey man, toss me the keys, I want to take this for a spin, you'd be like, all right, just, take care of it. But you would trust that they're not going to grind the gears. They're not going to like smash in the curbs on purpose or smoke cigarettes in your car. You'd be like, all right, it's cool. So they'd come back and they'd, borrow your car for a day and they'd give it back and you'd be like, all right, I can deal with that. It's a little stressful, but I can deal with it. But if it's some random person, you're just like throwing your keys into a mosh pit and like, whoever gets the keys takes my car, like it's going to be incredibly hard because you just won't trust them and you won't have the compersion, which is a word I should explain. So compassion is this idea of being with someone in their suffering. So compassion literally means with suffering. Passion is actually the etymology of it. It's to mean suffering. So you're with someone in their suffering, in their hardship. But compersion is to be with somebody in their pleasure. And it's something we don't even really have a word for that's that common. But it's much easier to have compersion for both your partner and the other person when you love them both. And I think that's what a tribe created. It created the ability to have compersion, to actually love the fact that somebody else was having a good time and love the fact that your partner was having a good time because you knew them. So I think another thing that's going to make this possible is when you have more of a tribal construct, when you have like a group of people and the partnerships, you know, are a lot more fluid and easier to flow within that group of people that you love, rather than just this random wide world that we have now, where most likely the partners are going to be people you absolutely don't know. And I think that's a very difficult thing for the human psyche to be able to do. Now, it is possible that you can universally see everybody in the world as you living a different life and love them. And I think you think of somebody like Ram Dass, you think of someone like Don Miguel Ruiz, who wrote the 4 Agreements and Mastery of Love. And you could think of somebody like that and you'd be like, that dude's got this. He loves every single human being on this earth like he loves himself. And so the whole world is his tribe. And I think if you're at that level of integral consciousness, I think you got this. Like, it's a way that you can really, really do this. But short of that, it's going to be really hard. It's going to be like gears of a clock that are slightly missynced, and they're going to grind and they're going to grind. And some of that grinding is going to be productive, but it's also going to be really hard.
I'm sure a lot of friends over the years ask you about it, and I'm sure you gave them some advice. Did any of them have success, or did they have learnings?
All of them had learnings. Universally, everybody had learnings. But, and you know, a lot of people tried it because it's an attractive thing. And when I would talk to my like homies about it, they'd be like, "Oh man, it sounds incredible. You get to go out and be with these girls and be honest about it." And I was like, "Yeah, that part is incredible. It is super incredible that I get to have the freedom to do what I'm able to do and be radically honest about it. Tell my partner like, hey, I'm going to go take this trip with this girl." And she'd be like, "Okay, cool." You know, and we would even, you know, make kind gestures. Like I showed up at a hotel with one of the girls that I was seeing, and my partner sent us a bottle of champagne and some strawberries. And I was like, that's fucking really sweet. So it's like the opposite paradigm of like dishonesty and jealousy and all of these different things, that you have these moments that are really incredible, but it's also so hard. It's like really, really brutal. But so that same person that would see the positive sides of it, because maybe they'd go out with me and they'd see me with one of my other partners. They'd be like, "This is amazing. You know, you got it made." I was like, "All right, yeah, cool. Now think about that girl that you love so much, you know, like that woman, your baby girl, the person that you just cherish her. And then imagine somebody else just having sex with her any way they want. How do you feel about that?" And they'd be like, "Fuck that." And I'm like, exactly. Exactly. So like, that's the thing. That's both sides. And I actually found that, you know, the women that I knew were like, I think I can deal with that a lot more than the guys when they would imagine their girl or their woman sleeping with somebody else. I found that just in my own experience, the women that I would talk to about it, like, I think I could do that. Like, I think I could do that a little bit more frequently than the men who, you know, it's just, I think we have a lot of societal conditioning and we have these natural protective, jealous urges that are just difficult for a man to overcome, which is also another reason why the learning is so great.
Yeah, that's powerful.
I appreciate you sharing that, and congrats. And yeah, I'm happy for you, man. That's it.
Yeah, thank you.
You seem really happy, and she seems amazing. You guys seem great together, and you know, you've been through this whole journey, and I know a lot of people that have watched you and learned, and I heard some of your comments, and it's a massive learning experience. I mean, Jesus, like you said, to really understand or to try to unpack all those visceral reactions you're having and why is this, and that's deep. That's super deep. I just want to finish on the book. You know, your first book, Own the Day, was about, you know, these series of practices that you put in, you know, kind of actual physical things you did, I think, to kind of prepare your mind on a daily basis, but like long term. This is Master Your Mind, Master Your Life, where I think you're going deeper into the mind. Can you just talk about what the book is about? And is it like things that you've learned more in the last few years, or is it like your whole life?
A little bit of both, a little bit of both, because these are things that I've really learned through all of the different journeys that I've been on, from that first vision quest to, the darkness retreat that happened this January, to all the other transformational experiences with the cold and the heat and the ice, and ways that I can kind of put my stress test myself, my own psyche. Polyamory is a huge teacher. So all of these different things, and trying to condense these and everything with on it, all of the learning that I've had, all of the ways that I've sought extrinsic pleasure and validation, and then found that really where the wellspring was, where the source of that joy and freedom was all internal, being present with the small pleasures of everything in life. So I'm taking all of these learnings, doing a ton of research, and then creating my own version of the hero's journey of the mind, like the 12 essential steps that you should take, that everybody can take, to kind of lead their mind on this journey where they can get to that state of freedom, get to that state like I was when I took my blindfold off and I looked out at the world and was just flooded with joy and gratitude and this feeling of just immense bliss at our existence, and try and take people through that journey and say, like, these are the levels that you need to follow. And starts with really understanding the narratives that we have. And that's a great thing that I think your podcast does a great job of, is it expands the conventional narrative. So it says, all right, this is the conventional narrative. Here's an alternative hypothesis. Look into this. There's a lot of institutions and structures that may not have your best interest at heart. There may be billions of dollars. There may be political power. There may be all kinds of things that are motivations that are skewing what people think. There may be just the fear that people feel themselves. So look at the narratives that are out there in the world. Choose narratives that are more helpful, which really involves taking your own power back, like understanding the power that we have of our own minds to create our reality. So it starts with that, which is like the hero's journey. It's the ordinary world. You have to look at the ordinary world and say, this is the ordinary world. This is what everybody says. If you're depressed, take a pill. If you got this situation, this is what we expect you to do. Getting a bunch of money, that's going to make you happy. Like all of these conditioned narratives that we have, and take a look at those and then say, all right, maybe there's another hypothesis. Maybe we have a lot more power ourselves, to find our own happiness and joy within us. And then start to go on the journey. Find your purpose, commit to that purpose, cultivate those true allies in a tribe, practice gratitude, learn how to love yourself unconditionally, do use the tools to heal your trauma, face your fear head on, start to identify with that whisper in your head, that potential that you have that's always kind of guiding you to what's possible, and then really live in the present and enjoy this experience we have. So breaking that out into 12 different steps and levels, talk about all the times I've failed, all the ways that I've been mastered. And that was one of the things I did in Own the Day. Each step had both getting owned and owning it. So the contrast of like, all right, this is me when I totally fucked this up, and this is how I felt, and it was terrible. And this is other people. And these are historical examples of different situations where we've made these mistakes, and this is the result. And then here's what it looks like when you transcend this level, when you move on beyond this level, learn the lessons and adapt. So it's a beast, this new book that I'm working on. I mean, it's absolutely a beast. It's actually, the mind is more complex than the body, as I think a lot of people can understand. The body is a lot simpler, input equals output in a more kind of regular pattern, but trying to break that down into a journey that everybody can go on. So I'm just learning every day as I'm doing the research and then kind of putting words to these ideas. And it's been fucking beautiful, a little beautiful hell of me trying to sort all this out, as I think any big writing project is. So yeah, it should be out late spring next year. And I'm just really excited to get this out, because this is, I think is, more, it cuts to more like the fundamental things that really, we have to support the body. That's like the base layer of the Maslow's pyramid of needs. Like we have to get the body right. And I think Own the Day does a great job of talking about all of these fundamental practices throughout every period of the day that are going to help support your body. Because when the body's in pain, or the body doesn't have enough energy, or you're not thinking about the basic things in the right way, it's going to be hard to like expand, go beyond that to the mind. So this one's tackling the mind itself. And that's just a really rich and robust topic. And I think the way that I've structured it is going to be really helpful to people. And And that's the goal. I want everybody, like I said, I want everybody to feel that kind of joy and love and zest for life and appreciation for each other, because that's what's going to change the whole collective. It starts with you feeling it yourself, because when you feel it yourself, your actions are naturally going to flow from that. You're going to want to protect the things you love.
Well, I'm excited to get a copy.
Again, your passion's coming off the screen again, Aubrey. So these are two things you should definitely spend some time on the next year: the book and the tribe, for sure. Just want to finish with a few questions about you. If I were to ask 5 of your best friends, what is Aubrey's superpower? How is this man able to do everything that he does? What would they tell me? What are some of the things that I might hear from them?
I think probably they would say that it's my honesty. It's the vulnerability of my honesty, is just being, if I'm crushing it at something, I'm not going to downplay myself and pretend that I'm not, just because it makes everybody more comfortable. And if I'm getting fucking my ass kicked, I'm going to let you know that too. I'm going to let you know the honest truth about what's going on with me. And I think that honesty allows me to learn so much faster and also get supported so much faster. And people can trust that, it's not like when I was polyamorous, I was like, check out all these girls I'm able to date. This is awesome. I was like, yeah, okay, this is awesome. But I'm also getting devastated regularly, and I think people really appreciate that. And I think that's the superpower. It's just being honest, having the courage to go out and test myself and then honestly reporting back, like, what happened? Like, how was this? And I think that's what's probably the most, significant defining factor. It's not that I have some incredible talent that I am just riding on this talent level. I'm just putting myself in uncomfortable spots and then reporting back the honest truth about what I'm seeing.
That is a superpower in its way, I guess. What was the best day of your life and the worst?
Man, that's interesting. I think there's the best days of my life. I think, getting with my new partner, Vailana, some of those moments where that actually opened up and I realized the potential of my life, how much that would dramatically shift with a love like hers. That's up there. Some of these amazing transformational experiences I had, those are some of the best days. Of course, those key moments, that day where I was going to meet Joe Rogan for a 30-minute coffee and it turned into a 4.5-hour, chat about everything in the cosmos, and I knew that I had like a real friend and ally. And there's so many like beautiful key moments like that it would be hard to rank them all in priority. And of course, like I said, doing mushrooms on the slopes, I got to put those up pretty high. Some of the moments with the Fit for Service tribe, just experiencing what it was like to see a tribe come together. And then some of the hardest moments, of course, some of those moments in polyamory were absolutely just grueling and brutal. I remember there was one moment I was in a hotel room in New York, and this was when my partner was with a particularly physically aggressive lover. Not anything that was like that she didn't want to do, but it was just his natural inclination. And it was so hard for me. I didn't think I could go on, and I didn't know what to do. So I'm not one that prays often. I don't believe in an anthropomorphized deity, so I don't really pray. But at that point, I was out of tools. I was out of everything. And I was just like, please, please, please. Like, I need help. I just need help. Like, whatever spirits or forces or guides are out there, just like, please. And I'm just sitting on the wood floor, just crying, my back up against the bed. And, fortunately I got some guidance that was kind of poetic, which I might as well share. I got this kind of guidance that came through, and it said, the sun does not judge itself by the shadows that it casts. I was like, what does that mean? I was like, oh, like I'm reflecting back on myself based on what she's doing, the effect that I'm having on the world. And it really taught me about the importance of just being the sun, of just shining and loving myself. And so there's these key moments that have had turning points. So every dark moment, every time I've hit that rock bottom moment, and there's been a lot of those for a variety of different causes. I haven't experienced some of the most intense traumas that a lot of people have experienced. I don't have one of those moments like like a soldier might have from war, or like someone who's experienced some certain atrocities in their own life. But all of these small moments have brought me into the darkest darkness, into the deepest cave of my own psyche. But always reliably on the other side of that is some amazing pearl of insight and some amazing pearl of wisdom. So when I look back at the worst days of my life, they're also some of the best days of my life, because they facilitated the necessary response and adaptation that actually brought me to where I am. So I think what's hard for me about that question is I've done such a good job, looking at these things and then finding the value of them. Even my car wreck, when I blacked out driving my car in the middle of the afternoon after a good sleep and a nice smoothie, blacked out, ran into a guardrail, the guardrail cut off and came through my car and almost slit my throat and like mangled my face. And I woke up in the hospital. Like even that moment I knew like, oh, I'm going to learn something really important here. So yeah, that was a terrible day, but the importance of like everything that I learned after that to really appreciate that I could smell and see and taste and kiss, in my normal life as soon as I was going to heal, like all of those lessons are so valuable that, I'm grateful for all of those hard times, all of those brutal times that I've experienced.
Yeah, when I asked that question,
Someone who's kind of aware, I always get that feeling, like I get that laugh when you say that, because people that are aware realize that the worst days are actually your best days too. And I saw that car wreck. Jesus, Aubrey, that's gnarly. Looking at the car wreck is gnarlier than looking at your face after the day. I mean, that's scary. You're lucky to be alive.
Yeah.
So
no doubt, man, no doubt. I mean, I think what happened was as I blacked out, I had my foot on the accelerator, and I think I accelerated, and I had one of those fast Teslas. So the Tesla goes like, it picks up speed super quick. So who knows how fucking fast I was going into that guardrail. I'm just so grateful that there wasn't another car there or anything, because I just passed out, blacked out, and then accelerated and just mangled the car. And fortunately, it's a super safe car, and everything had to work out just perfectly for me to be all right. But car was mangled, my face was mangled, but I'm all right.
Yeah, you are.
Through with the story to tell. So I know. So I'm very happy that you did, and yeah, you're a completely transformed guy on the back of that. What scares you, Aubrey?
When I get scared, I'm scared that that Gandalf's going to come too late, to go back to that metaphor that I use, that the psychedelics that are becoming legal, and that everything that can really help humanity before humanity implodes is going to be too late. And I can get lost in those fears. And that's the impetus for faith. That's the impetus to not have faith in some deity, like I said, but just to have faith that this is the natural compression that's going to create the adaptation. Like we needed this hardship. We needed all of these challenges, all of these structures that are corrupt, everything that exists, to actually become aware and become aware of ourselves and become aware collectively. So, but sometimes I'll get lost in that, like, fuck, I don't know how this is ever going to reach scale. Like, I don't know how it's ever going to be enough. Like the orcs are going to win, and it's going to be Mordor, in mass. And I can get scared of that sometimes. And that's really where I have to just anchor to that. Like maybe this is just like that giant ayahuasca ceremony, or like a macrocosm of my own life. And this compression is what's going to create the rebound. And I just have to anchor to that faith and do my best. And what really gets me through that is just the kind of the Spartan ethos. Like, all right, maybe this is too late. Maybe we've gone too far and it's, we're never going to be able to go back. But how do I want to orient myself to that? Like just like the 300 at Thermopylae, with your shielder on it, like with your shielder on, like we're going to fight to the last man. And if I do that, like, I know I've done my part, I'll have no regrets. So if the orcs overrun us, if the Persian king swarms us, like all good, we've gone out like a hero. And that actually gives me like a deep sense of peace and just, all right, like I can do that. I can do that.
Yeah. How do you want to go out?
I thought about that the other day. Great thing about having kids is you can just project right to them and say, how would my boys want to see me go out? and then like I'd like to go out just like that, fighting, not cowering, it's something that actually you can try to get some positivity out of. What would we be surprised to learn about Aubrey Marcus? Something non-CEO like, non-warrior like, non that stuff. Something you do that we might not know.
What's great about having my partner Vailana is she's such a playful spirit. She's also a medicine woman and incredibly deep and a sound healer and has that aspect. But most of the time, she's just so playful that it brings out so much of my own playful side. So if anybody wants to see like the silliest, most playful side of Aubrey Marcus, like follow her on social media because she's at Vailana Marcus, Vyalana. And she's always filming me doing like the silliest things, and things that, so when I was a boy, like I loved like He-Man and swords and all kinds of things, but I also loved My Little Ponies. Right? Like I loved them. They were pretty and I would have them and I'd have them next to my He-Mans. Yeah. It was like my little Genghis Khan harem of My Little Ponies that I would have. And then I'd have my warriors. So recently, like in our shower, we have this like little shelf where I put these figurines. My sister bought me a couple, and I started buying some more. I got a Thundercat up there. I got Bruce Lee that has a dragon on him, and then I was like, I want a My Little Pony for the little shelf there. So she'll like film me opening the My Little Pony package and all. And the first thing I did was smell it because I remembered when I was a kid, like My Little Ponies had this little like pleasant plastic smell or rubber smell that I was like, oh, they don't smell the same. They're not the same, which is probably good because whatever that smelled like back in the 80s, I'm sure was toxic. So it's probably better that it is like it is now. But there's, really when I'm at my best, I'm just playing and having fun and being silly. And I think that's what you'll see when you go deeper and deeper under the layers. Because a lot of the podcasts and things, it's me intellectual ideas and big concepts, but when I'm my happiest and when I feel like I'm my true self, I'm just being a goof, just playing and being a goof.
Yeah, right.
What's the future of Austin, Texas, and is it going to change when Joe Rogan rolls into town?
It is. I mean, this is now like an epicenter of media. I think people have underestimated the Joe Rogan effect for a while, and I think On It is just one of the many things that he's put his energy into and really helped blossom. But there's, podcasting at large has greatly benefited from what he's done. And I think still he's underrated for what he's causing. And so him anchoring here in Austin and throwing his flag down here, there's already so much here. I mean, Tim Ferriss is here and so many other businesses are moving, but with so many people that are going to be coming to his podcast, coming to his studio here in Austin, it's going to become an epicenter. And I'm excited about that. I mean, Austin's been a great town and I've been here 24 years and I've just watched it. Some people complain, oh, it's not the same. I'm like, fuck that. It's better. It's better every day. Like it just keeps getting better. And I think it's just going to keep getting better. And I'm incredibly excited, just to have that many people who are coming through on a regular basis. And then I'm sure some of them are going to see it and see the beauty of this town and want to move as well. So I think this is going to be a real epicenter for a lot of change and a lot of progressive ideas and a lot of amazing people all gathering around the city. So I'm stoked.
Super exciting. We're coming over.
Trip. I was telling you before we started, we did a trip to New York City this year and interviewed like 20 people. The plans were to go to LA, and the next viable city was Austin because I know so many cool people there, like Tim Kennedy and all these other people. I want to go out and do his sheepdog training. I know he's training it on it all the time, and Ferriss is there, like you said. You guys are there. Some great. I mean, just it seems like the great spot to be. So that's good,
man. That's going to be great.
Down the train with you as well.
How's your relationship with Joe Rogan changed over 10 years? And is it hard to go from someone who's a friend and then you're a podcast guest and then you're doing business together and then now I guess the future is unknown? How has that been?
It's evolved in a lot of different ways. I think there's he's just grown more and more momentum, as things have gone on. And it's been beautiful to be a part of that and to watch it and to, kind of cheer it on from the sidelines. And as I said, I've been on the show a lot and we've supported each other in a lot of different ways. I think it gets kind of interesting when the business gets really significant, when all of a sudden you're talking now this is a big business. This isn't a little project where me and you are kind of figuring stuff out and chatting about ideas and coming up with stuff. Now this is a massive business. And with that, lawyers get involved and different people get involved, and there can become tension in a friendship when things get that large. And so I think the intentional effort is to kind of continually anchor to that kind of friendship and support. And certainly that's been a journey as well. It's just trying to maintain that alliance and that friendship when there's lots of other outside forces in this giant machine that's now like connecting us as friends. And, so it's been a beautiful journey as well to just kind of figure that out. Like, what's it like when you start a business with a friend? Well, it's super fun as things are growing and starting to get easy. And then you have this massive juggernaut. And that's when you see a lot of these partnerships have struggle. But I think, the beautiful part of Joe and I is we're just committed to being honest and being truthful and like getting back to those core principles. And I think that's what's, kept this intact and kept this rolling forward. So, a lot of people say, don't do business with friends. I say, absolutely do it. Just know that it's going to cause some challenges for sure. It's another factor. Now this is a third entity, it's like it has a life of its own. And yes, we're, shepherds and we're parents to a certain degree, but it has its own life. And that organism is going to sway this way and that way. And it's going to, present challenges.
Learning experience.
Final couple questions. I'll give you our usual here. If you could pick up the phone and call up 20-year-old Aubrey, based on everything you know now, and give that young man some advice, I might be able to guess what you're going to say, but what would you tell him?
I just let him know, like, it's going to work out, man. It's going to work out. Like, whatever you're going through, it's going to work out. Like, you're going to figure it out. Like, just keep learning, keep listening, like you would in a psychedelic journey. Like, witness it, be with it, as you said, which I think is great. Like, be with whatever experience you're going through. Know that it's going to change. It's going to evolve. You're going to learn something from it. I'm literally batting 1,000 for having an experience and learning something valuable from that experience. So when you look back, you can have that clarity, like, oh yeah, I've learned from absolutely everything. But you look forward and there's trepidation. So in hindsight, everything is perfect. But with foresight, wow, it's scary, because the next one might be the one that you don't recover from. It might be the one that you don't learn anything from. And it's just going to be that thing that will change your life irrevocably for the worse. But that never happens. It's never happened before. So why is it going to happen in the future? So I would just encourage that young man to enjoy his life and trust that, looking at the future with foresight, that it's all going to work out, just as looking at the past with hindsight, everything works out. So it's that skill of having foresight with the same kind of purview as your hindsight.
That's the thing to master. Second part of that question, best advice you ever received. Could it come from a mentor, from Joe, from Mother Ayahuasca, from your dad? I don't know, but something that maybe sticks out in your brain.
So when I was in a really challenging part, this is actually fairly recent. It was a challenging part of my polyamory journey, and I felt stuck. And I had the concept about self-love, but there was a book that arrived to me, and the book is called Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It. And it's by Kamal Ravikant, and that's Naval Ravikant's brother. And that book arrived at just the right time. And the title of the book says it all, like, love yourself like your life depends on it. And it goes on to explain self-love as a practice. Like, practice makes the master of everything. We have this idea that self-love is something that just comes and it just like blesses us, like a rainstorm or something like that. But no, it's not that. It's like us drawing water from the well constantly. And he does that with breaths, so he has you inhale a breath and say, I love myself, and then exhale and say, thank you. And you just do a set of those 10 breaths whenever you think about it. I love myself. Thank you. And like that one piece of advice, love yourself like your life depends on it, was a massive catalyst. It started I think that book really was what allowed me to open up to this union with my wife. and all of the experiences in the future was saying like, I have to love myself, not just in concept, in theory, but in practice. And I have to practice it. And I have to forgive myself for all of the grievances that I've been holding from the past, and go through and then write out all these things, write out all the things I forgive myself for, all the ways that I've been judging myself, and then withholding love for myself because I felt like I didn't deserve it, because I was still punishing myself for those things I was judging myself for. And that's preventing you from actually loving yourself and preventing the world from loving you. So that book and that advice about self-love is, I think, the most important advice. And it comes with practice. Forgiveness first, and then layering on top of that the practice of self-love.
Do more of that practice for sure.
We all can.
Yeah.
It's like one of those things, like there's not too much, and people, I think sometimes people worry, oh, I'll be a narcissist. No, you won't, because the energy of a narcissist is to say that you're better than other people. You're more important than anybody else. That's not love. That's actually the absence of love that makes you want to be better than somebody else to deserve the love. Like the whole energy of that is, I don't have enough, so I need to prove it in these certain external ways, and I need to be better than other people, so I'm valid enough to love myself based on these conditions. That's not love. That's not true love, self-love. So it's the opposite of that. So there's no ceiling on it. Like when you have that, you're not going to want to put anybody down. You don't need to be better than anybody. You don't need to prove anything to fucking anybody, because you got the goods. You're holding the hand, and you got the nuts. You got the cards. You got 4 aces. Like that's the thing. And from that position, you're in the ultimate position of strength. If someone wants to break up with you or cast a insult to you, you can look at it and say like, all right, what can I learn from this? But it doesn't change how you feel about yourself. So you're able to just respond to everything in a different way. Like that is the position of power, to true power. And with that, it allows you to, hold that power in the gentle way, because you don't have to react. You don't have to react in this harsh, negative way, because you don't have anything to prove to yourself. And so that's your bastion, that's your citadel. And so the more that you can apply and build those bricks of your citadel, the better off you're going to be.
Imagine if the whole world just jacked up their self-love by, a factor of 10. I was just imagining Twitter would just go dark.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
I mean, I'm not trying to, sound idealistic, but it would solve a lot of problems. A lot of that lashing out is internal, right? It would change a lot if we could just invest some time in ourselves and be with ourselves and love ourselves. I mean, like you said, it starts with the individual, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, otherwise we're having to constantly put other people underneath us to prop ourselves up. Oh, these people are worse than me. So let me put them underneath me, and then I'll prop myself up. Oh, even better, if they have some level of fame or some level of success, great. I can put them underneath me. They're a big body. They're a big entity. I can stand on top of them with my moral righteousness, and I'm better than them. So I feel better about myself. Well, if you really love yourself, you don't need to feel better about yourself than anybody. You've got everything that you need. This is all a game of love. It's like, how much can we love ourselves? And if we really love ourselves, we don't need to put anybody down to love ourselves more. So we have an abundance. We're overflowing. And as we're overflowing with our own cup of love, like everybody can drink, not even from our cup, they can drink from the saucer that the cup is sitting on, which has a surplus of all of the love that we have. And it becomes a well. And it just totally would change so many of the actions of so many different individuals and different groups and different societies.
It's great advice.
Last question is advice to that 20-year-old that is still listening to us after all this time, or watching us somewhere, who, let's be honest, Aubrey, grew up in a world where digital divide is part of who they are. They grew up on the internet. They grew up in whatever you want to call it, cancel culture, victim culture, whatever. And yet something resonated today about what you said. And they're like, okay, how can I move forward to try to connect with me, my tribe, or something? Just, I don't know, advice or thoughts for them.
My spiritual mentor, Don Howard, who ran a facility called Spirit Quest Sanctuary. I did ayahuasca and wachuma with him for many years. And he always said something. He said, in order to be of service, you have to be fit for service. And so all of everything that he would talk about was it starts here, it starts at home. So I think it's easy to look out at the world and be like, I'm going to change this about the world and change this, when really, and this is a truism, the most significant thing that you can do is to start right where you are. So don't get so lost in everything that's happening out there, because that can be almost debilitating. That can actually freeze you. You can get some kind of paralysis looking at the grandeur of everything that's happening and forget that, all of the change happens from every single individual changing. Like, that's what's going to change. And you're not going to be able to change anybody else if you haven't changed. Like, how are you going to convince somebody to love themselves if you don't love yourself? Fucking impossible. You have no chance. So it all starts with you actually doing the work for yourself. And that's your act of service. It's becoming fit for service as your act of service. So the emanation of your being is actually creating the change that you're looking for. And your actions will flow naturally from the emanation of who you are. So focus on yourself, like who you are, and making sure that you're fit for service. And that's going to be your greatest act of service, because everything else you do is going to flow naturally from that.
Incredible advice.
Incredible advice. I just had a flashback. I had Laird Hamilton on a little while ago, and I asked him at the very end, and he said, turn it off. That's what he said. Turn it off. That was his advice, which is a similar way of saying, just worry about you.
That's it.
Aubrey, it's worth denying your weight. Look, I just want to thank you so much. It's hard for you to know all the people you influenced, and when you hear someone say that they heard you on a podcast 10 years ago, I'm sure it's hard to even process. But yeah, all the stuff you've done has had a massive effect on so many people around the world, including me. And like you said, the Rogan effect was massive. It's why I started London Real, and it was those early conversations. I can't emphasize enough to you, back in the day when it was on Ustream, when it was on Vimeo. Yeah. This is before Rogan was on YouTube, right? I was an early adopter because I was a UFC fan and I was a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guy, so I went deep down the rabbit hole. And literally, I still remember on a Sunday afternoon, sunny afternoon in London, listening to a podcast you had with Rogan. I think it was a later one, like 127 or something. And the 3-hour conversation on Vimeo, I'm hanging out with guys I would normally never hang out with, talking about things that nobody else was talking about. You could never talk about anywhere unless maybe you were, a beatnik somewhere. And it just really connected me to people when I was completely disconnected. I was all about me and trying to make as much money as possible. I was drinking myself to death. I was alone. I was depressed. And you guys gave me that tribe, if you will. And you guys really were, like, honestly, one of the few comforting things in my life was like that podcast. Hard to actually, hard to overestimate it, So thanks for that. And
of course, brother.
Thanks for taking me on this crazy journey, man.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's and the journey continues. And thank you to all the work that you've been doing, especially in this last year. I mean, it takes a lot of fearlessness, to kind of push out there and share those unconventional, unpopular opinions. And it's important, like we need the full gamut, whether you agree with everything that everybody says or not, like those voices have to be heard. Like the chorus has to have all of those disparate entities. And so many people want to stamp that out. And that's madness. And you're really making a stand. And I think that's absolutely important, because everything needs to be heard so we can control our own narrative, by getting all of the information and not be influenced, and just say, all right, here's all the information. What do I believe? And that's the great gift that I think, you're giving, is just encouraging people to make a decision. What do I believe? And that's absolutely vital, because that's going to be a necessary part of how we chart the future.
Thanks for saying that. I appreciate it. I always remember Graham Hancock saying on our show, right before we went on Rogan's show, you should have sovereignty over your own body, when he was talking about how you should have the right to, ingest a psychedelic. And I think you should have sovereignty over your own mind and be able to consume whatever information you want and then make a decision as an adult, and when people take that away for us, it boggles my mind. If someone had told me I couldn't listen to you and Rogan talk about ayahuasca, or Rogan makes some stupid joke about something because it blocks censorship rules, it's crazy. So yeah, we believe wholeheartedly in what we're doing, and we think everyone should be able to make that choice themselves about that and everything else. So yeah.
In a weird way, everything that's happening though, like the beauty of it is nobody would censor anything they weren't afraid of. You know what I mean? Like who bans a book that's not scary? You know, like if a book's terrible, it doesn't get banned. You know, it never did. But all of the banned books became the most popular books, you know, in the annals of time. So all of this energy to try and stamp it out, it's not going to work. You know, in this giant ceremony of life, that resistance is just going to perpetuate the thing. So in a way, you know, as much as we need to fight against that as well, in a way we can be like, all right, thanks. You know, like, thanks for giving this all of your energy that's trying to stamp it out. Like, good job.
Yeah, when you perturb the matrix like that, it almost exposes the whole thing. So like on one hand, it's like, doesn't feel good to be censored and it's really wrong. But the other hand, it's like, you just showed everybody what's going on. So everyone now sees it and now they're like, but this is the internet and I can go find it. So like you said, in a weird way, it almost defeats the purpose of what they're trying. And in these weird times, you can actually see things you wouldn't normally see. You know, when the economy is booming and you go to work and you make your money and you focus on what's in front of you, you can't see all the narratives that you've been co-opted into. But when it's COVID time and things are being censored, all of a sudden you're like, well, wait a second. Like you said, just because you wear a white coat, why do I assume everything is right? Just because the government says it, why do I? And actually, there's more awareness now in a weird way. So yeah, it's a beautiful thing. We're riding it and we're enjoying it. So again, thank you, Aubrey. I appreciate you. Best of luck to the new adventure. It sounds awesome. It sounds super exciting. And you seem totally connected to it and totally congruent with it, which doesn't surprise me, but it's just great to see. So thanks so much. Next time, let's do this in London or in Austin.
Thank you, brother. I can't wait. Let's do it.
All right, man. Sounds good.
You're on social, AubreyMarcus.com for website, or how can people get in touch with you?
AubreyMarcus.com, at Aubrey Marcus, Aubrey Marcus Podcast. All pretty easy.
All there.
Book out in 2021.
Yep.
Okay.
Much love, brother. Thank you so much. Sending you peace.
Much love back to you, brother. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate y'all.
Thank you, dude. And that's it, folks. There he is, Aubrey Marcus, the legend. Appreciate you for being here and tuning in, and we'll see you next time on London Real. Take care.
At London Real, we believe that individual transformation can change the world. Join us and start your journey today.